Hey everyone, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy the audiobooks, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support us further, consider becoming a Patreon member. As a member, you'll gain the ability to request the next part of a novel audiobook I've uploaded, depending on your Patreon tier.
Fortunately, The Nightmare was not a series. It did not divide into Part 1 and Part 2. Hao Ren just happened to appear at the same place where he left the last time. The wolf pack that attacked him previously was not there anymore. This unfortunate kid did not have to go through the same unfortunate incident where he was attacked by a pack of wolves when he entered the dream last time. However, the howling of the wolves still came from all directions. Although the wolves did not sound like they were nearby, it was enough to frighten the Green Hand. Hao Ren was deeply aware that he was in a land without any rule of law. The Animal Protection Organization and rangers were in another world. Therefore, neither the wolf nor Hao Ren were protected here. And frankly speaking, that was the wolf's territory while he was an outsider. As the only outsider on the prairie where wolves were entrenched, Hao Ren tightened his clothes around him to ward off the chill. The chill crept from his body to his heart. He walked forward, wondering whether his brain had degenerated because he spent too much time with Lily. Why did he put on his pajamas just now? Based on the previous experience, one's physical condition in the plane of dreams was exactly the same as in the reality. It included the clothes on the body and physical state of fitness. However, Hao Ren had forgotten about it. Vivian, Isaacs, and Hao Ren messed up preparations in the living room. As a result, he almost had insomnia and was unable to get into the dream plane. To add, he was wearing pajamas. Hao Ren walked across the prairie with uneven footsteps. He looked at his feet and sighed. Damn, I actually forgot to wear shoes. The psycho will most probably laugh at me if she finds out. A voice suddenly echoed from the side. She'll have a good laugh at you and then post it on the message board of the local universe channel. But, I can't tell how many likes she'll get in the end. She is a well-known, spamming monster in the universe. She has to repeatedly post oracles for her followers because nobody reads her posts. Hao Ren was startled by the sudden sound. He looked around carefully and found a small piece of metal, the size of a hand. It was floating beside him and had been silently following him. He was surprised and asked, "Terminal. What are you doing here? Why can't I come in?" The MDT said lazily. "Didn't you hear what Raven 12345 said? I need to guide you and you can't get into the plane of dreams. If I can guide you into the dream, why can't I come in then? But don't you need to dream to come in here?" Hao Ren looked at the superb, little device in astonishment and asked, "Have AIs become so advanced to the extent that they can even dream? Dreaming is a boring and inefficient way to maintain the system." "I don't need it," the MDT replied loftily. "Who told you one had dream in order to enter the plane of dreams? It's just you who has to dream to come in here. When your control over your mental power reaches a certain level, you will have access to the plane of dreams. However, it's still too early for you to think about it." Hao Ren knew that this device would find a way to quarrel with him whenever it started talking. So, the smartest way to deal with it was to ignore it. He glanced at the vast prairie and felt it was good to have a companion to talk with. He thought perhaps the device would play an unexpected role. "Can you conjure up a set of clothes?" he asked tentatively. The MDT paused and asked, "What are you thinking about? Isn't this a virtual world? Aren't you a supercomputer? In science fiction movies, people in the virtual world use data to organize a..." Before Hao Ren could finish his sentence, the MDT rudely interrupted. "Who gave you such false insight? The plane of dreams is a virtual world. Then why can you take something out of here and why do people actually die in this place?" Hao Ren opened his mouth but could not find the right word to say. He admitted that he had carelessly made assumptions about this unknown field again. In fact, Raven 12345 had briefed him on the authenticity of the plane of dreams before. Nevertheless, Hao Ren just had a very limited understanding of it at the time. He never fully understood the problem. Now, well, he still did not really understand it, but he had learned to ignore it. "I don't even have shoes," Hao Ren walked along and sighed. "I can't keep on walking without shoes. Is there anything that can act as replacement?" "There is," the MDT said calmly. Just as Hao Ren's spirit was lifted, The MDT slowly uttered the latter part of its sentence, tenacious spirit. LOL. A man and a device, isn't this combination strange? We're walking under the dim light of night. Hao Ren did not want to stop randomly. Even if his physical state was not good at that moment, he decided to go on. After all, the purpose of entering the plane of dreams was to temper himself. If he just stayed there until he woke up naturally, the trip would have been meaningless. Anyway, he would force his way out, thanks to the little pill Raven 12345 gave him, whenever he was caught in a deadly threat. Besides, he was not worried about really dying in that place. He was just curious about what kind of place it was. Hao Ren set his sights far ahead. The last time he left, he saw something like a house in the distance. This time, it was still there. This meant it was not an illusion. Therefore, he aimed for that house. A man and a device, isn't this combination strange, traveled under the dim light of night silently. When Hao Ren was feeling a little bored, the MDT suddenly spoke, I need to remind you of 3 things. Go ahead, replied Hao Ren. First, totally abandon the idea that this place is a virtual space. Although the plane of dreams isn't the real world, it has great influence on the real world. If you die here, it also means you die in the real world. Also, you can take things out of here. But you have to figure out the specific mechanism of taking out by yourself. Of course, you should have known. Second, whatever you see here, don't be surprised. Just accept it. Wait until you return to the real world and you can take your time to analyze the situation. Your intense confusion here will weaken your connection with the plane of dreams rapidly. It's not a good thing to finish the journey ahead of time. Third, don't you think it's stupid to let your mobile data terminal float beside you? I've seen people walking their cats and dogs but never a PDA. Keep me in your pocket now, do you hear me? Hao Ren was once again speechless. Hey, wait. Don't go. I'm talking to you. Do you hear me? Hurry up and put me in your pocket. I'm a mobile device but I'm not a self-moving device. Do you know what a mobile device means? Don't go. At least, tie me to a rope and drag me along. The floating function is for emergency use only, not for casual use. Hao Ren totally ignored the MDT, which was a little neurotic like Raven 12345. He just kept his head down and continued walking. The annoying noise from the MDT went on for half an hour in his ear. Hao Ren found that the physical strengthening of his body was highly effective. He did not even gasp for breath after walking for so long in the wilderness without shoes. Also, the soles of his feet were much brawnier than usual. After walking for a long time, the cottages in the distance looked closer. However, just before he was about to breathe a sigh of relief, something frightening happened. He clearly heard a rustling sound coming from some nearby bushes and then he smelled a faint odor of blood in the air. It was the smell of the beasts. They were wolves and they were unique, incredibly gigantic black wolves which only existed in the plane of dreams. The wolves had not come near yet but they had obviously smelled their prey. The beasts were carefully laying siege to Hao Ren and preparing to make him a hearty meal with their usual ambushing tactics. However, this time, Hao Ren was aware of the danger in advance. The last time he was aware of the wolves, he was already completely surrounded by them and there were faint gazes within the bushes. This time, he already sensed it when the wolves just started to make their move. Hao Ren deeply admired the bioenhancement and reconfiguration chamber. He silently wondered what the use of this little progress was. He was already surrounded by the wolves when he reacted. I recommend you don't run. The MDT's voice appeared in Hao Ren's mind. The device also knew that they needed to hide immediately. You can't outrun the wolves. You can only get rid of part of the siege with your current level of bioenhancement but you can't rush out of it. Fighting head-on. Hao Ren tried to calm his heartbeat. He knew that the wolves did not realize that he already knew they were approaching. I'm not sure. Were you confident when hundreds of armored wraiths ran after you in the palace? Mumbled the MDT. Don't worry. I will pull you out when you start dying. Now. Get ready. Get ready. Hao Ren could not keep his feet still when the MDT told him to get ready to fight. Ready for what? Do I really have to fight with the wolves? Hao Ren looked at what he was wearing. He was unarmed. He was wearing pajamas and no shoes. He roughly remembered that every black wolf on the prairie was taller and bigger than him. The MDT had actually told him confidently to get ready under such circumstances. He had the sudden urge to tie the piece of junk to a rope and turn it into a bolus. It was the only armed method he could think of in his position. The MDT pretended to be unaware of the dissatisfaction in Hao Ren's tone. It swung into Hao Ren's pocket and inexplicably said, "You've got your pay, but how much you can take out this time depends on you." As Hao Ren was about to ask the MDT what it meant, an audible rustle suddenly came from the nearby bushes. The wolves had seemingly noticed that they had alerted their prey and quickly shrank the blockade. Like the MDT mentioned, it was not realistic to try getting out of the siege by force. Hao Ren could only stay focused and prepared to face his first challenge in the Plane of Dreams. He recalled the scene in which he faced hundreds of armored wraiths in the crypt. Honestly, there was little reference value in that battle. He was accompanied by 2 super women with strong combat powers. Also, the armored wraiths just woke up, so they were slow and clumsy. They had no advantage other than their tenacious vitality. Therefore, it was easy to handle the armored wraith. All he did was calm down and then kick them hard. However, dealing with the wolves in the other world was a whole different story. Perhaps these wolves were lower than the armored wraiths in Vivian's eyes. However, as a man with little combat experience, the threat of predators was obviously higher. Hao Ren suddenly found it a little ridiculous. He ran into the Plane of Dreams without a second thought and sought trouble for himself just to improve his strength. Did it really make sense? A light in the darkness interrupted his thoughts. The wolves were getting closer. The smell of wolves wafted through the air and dark shadows appeared in sight. The wolves smelled so close he could touch them. Hao Ren did not know what to do should the beasts leap at him. Nonetheless, he guessed that the pack would probably send 1 or 2 first to test the water. That was how Animal World portrayed the wolves' behavior. He did not know how big the difference was between wolves in the Plane of Dreams and wolves in the real world. The confrontation between them did not last long. After the wolves found that the ambush had failed, one of them could not restrain itself any longer and leapt at Hao Ren. Hao Ren saw a huge shadow enlarging rapidly in front of him. He was extremely focused at that moment. His muscles were so tight, they almost burst open. All of a sudden, he dodged. Before he dodged, he fantasized that he would punch the black wolf right in the chest and got his first shot perfectly. But in fact, he did not have the courage to do it. When facing the danger of a fast attack, dodging was a man's first instinct. At least, he dodged well. The strange, giant black wolf was distinctly more fierce and agile than any wolf on Earth yet. Hao Ren was still able to dodge it. While he dodged the attack, Hao Ren instinctively brandished his right hand. He vaguely felt like he had hit something, but he was not sure how powerful the punch was. The black wolf turned quickly after falling to the ground. It kept a certain distance and confronted Hao Ren. Moonlight scattered across the prairie. Hao Ren's enhanced vision allowed him to see the beast's looks vividly. They were roughly the same as the wolves on Earth, but they were 2 times larger than normal wolves and they were all black. There were many plate-like, black protuberances on their heads and waists which seemed to be some kind of keratoes. This was simply not the same species as the wolves on Earth. There was no disturbance among the surrounding wolves. They just slightly adjusted their formation and kept the encirclement tighter. Hao Ren saw hostility in countless pairs of eyes. He was stunned. These stares were real. The wolves around him were observing the current situation with a keen look. The first black wolf growled at Hao Ren threateningly and sounded irritated. One of the protrusions on its waist was broken. It seemed that Hao Ren had hit it at random. The beast pounced on Hao Ren again in the blink of an eye. However, Hao Ren was in a much better state at the moment. He was surprised to find that his reflexes could keep up with the strange wolf's extreme hits, and this boosted his confidence. After making sure that the wolves around him did not intend to join the fight, he felt more reassured. Each time the wolf pounced on him, he repeated his actions. He fixed his eyes on the wolf and observed its movements. Then he dodged and punched it. During the fight, he found that he could see every inch of the wolf's hair even at such a fast pace. In the moment of his punch, he could even slightly adjust the angle of his attack. This was the kind of feeling he could not experience when he was dealing with the sluggish, armored wraiths using brute force in the crypt. Hao Ren punched the strange wolf in its belly. He did his best to not just hit the Kerato's armor. Therefore, the second punch was obviously much more powerful. The wolf whimpered, failed to grab Hao Ren's shirt and fell. However, Hao Ren soon felt a searing pain on his face. When he touched his face, he found that his hands were full of blood. He could have fallen to the ground because it meant that his head was almost bitten off by the wolf earlier on. But he had no time to quiver in fear. The wolf turned and rushed at him again as soon as it fell. At this point, Hao Ren reacted slower than the wolf. He watched the wolf's mouth as it approached him, but his body could not keep up with his mind. He could only watch the jaws bite his arm. "Damn!" Hao Ren spontaneously shouted. However, before he could recall what had just happened, he realized something. Why doesn't it hurt? The wolf hung heavily on his arm and it was really weighing down on him. Yet, when Hao Ren looked carefully, he found his arm covered with a thin layer of translucent membrane. The light membrane was thin but indestructible. The wolf lost lots of its fangs when it bit on the membrane. The wolf reacted slowly. After chewing his hand for a few seconds, it realized something was not right. The wolf howled in pain and quickly retreated. It ran around in circles a few meters away with a mouthful of blood. Hao Ren was still confused. The MDT explained, the 2 punches were quite good. You barely passed the mentality adjustment. This shows that you can keep up the fighting mentality in the case of ineffective assistive tools. The conditions are judged to be fulfilled. As the agent, your basic abilities have reached the target. Now, you get a rigid shield. Though it's not as good as the psionic shield, it has no radiation and it's good enough for you. Hao Ren was ecstatic to hear it. Finally, Raven 12345 did not cheat him this time. But I have to warn you, the rigid shield is limited in capacity. The gadget that you use to activate the shield in your body is symbiotic with your body. It's just for protecting the agent to keep him alive. Don't think of it as invincible. Of course, it's more than enough to deal with these wolves. That's good enough. Hao Ren waved excitedly. When he found that he finally had something to call a skill, he could not wait to try it. So, he pounced on the other wolf closest to him. The wolves finally stopped watching. They were in an uproar. For wolves pounced on Hao Ren at the same time from 2 different directions. He did not dodge and let them bite him as he was protected by the shield. After the wolf lost some of its teeth, it finally attacked Hao Ren's body. The brute force and agility of the wolf were real. 2 of them were fighting one-on-one. The battle was massive and astonishing. In fact, it was not so chaotic, but it would appear to be more powerful this way. Anyway, Hao Ren felt the way he fought was quite intense, and neglected the MDT when it said, "You're fighting like an animal." In the end, a reckless man was afraid of a rude man, while a rude man was afraid of a fearless man. Hao Ren was as strong as the black wolves and was protected by the shield. After a while the wolf was beaten. The other wolves were also hesitant to come forward after realizing that this weirdo could not be hurt. But the wolf was still fierce and tough. The wounded giant wolf still straightened its neck and roared, "Do you dare to spare my life?" How could Hao Ren possibly let go? No way. Who attacked me first just now? I was just watching. The first one to attack you is another one. The wolf roared, looked around and yelled, "Don't just watching, you cowards, come and help me. Doesn't matter how many of you, I'm going to grab just you. The heck you can talk. The heck you react so slowly." It was midnight on the Plain of Dreams. Standing on the step under the cool night breeze, Hao Ren and the giant black wolf were gazing at each other. The wolf was as tall as a human being. Both were equally shocked. Actually, it was more like an aftershock. A moment ago, what was thought to be a wild, black wolf had started talking. Plus its grammar and syntax were good. It spoke with a slight Beijing accent. This last inference was made possible thanks to the intelligent translation system, of course. Hao Ren was dead set that as strange as the Plain of Dreams was, there could not possibly be a black wolf capable of speaking like a Beijinger. One thing for sure, he thought, was when the wolf said, "Tua tua," a slang in northern China which means, "Yeah, absolutely," it was not a misinterpretation by the translation system. It was not the roar of a beast but authentic human language. This had been tried and tested true when the system failed to translate "woof," a sound Lily made earlier. It was only capable of recognizing highly structured sounds. Hao Ren was in his pajamas as he sat on the grass with his legs crossed. He was still covered in a thin layer of glimmer. He did not dare to remove his steel membrane shield because a pack of wolves still lurked around with their glaring eyes. He glanced at the big black wolf which was directly opposite him before he curiously asked, "You speak, don't you? Wolves around here can talk." "That depends on the wolf pack." The big black wolf eyed Hao Ren's translucent shield cautiously. The blow on its head from Hao Ren's fist covered in translucent shield felt like being hit by a steel rod. It had barely recovered from the wooziness but obliged to Hao Ren's questioning. In some parts of the steppe, wolves with lamellar bones like us talk, were the top breed. Unlike those retarded ones who can only howl at the moon, we're a lot more intelligent. "Where are you from? You don't even know wolves could talk." "We're the most well-known pack in the steppe." Like a lost ball in high weeds, Hao Ren did not have a single idea about the plane of dreams. He had to put his faith in the MDT and Raven 12345 suggestion, to act naturally and refrain from being overly surprised. Judging from the way the black wolf talked, Hao Ren figured it was a highly intelligent creature, probably as intelligent as a human. Abandoning his cocky manner, he tried to show sincerity by nodding his head. "It's kind of hard to tell where I come from. I'm just a passerby. You could just treat me like a traveler." "Traveler? In this steppe?" The black wolf looked at Hao Ren with its suspicious eyes before it wondered. "Few humans have come. This place isn't attractive to them. You can't grow food here. There's no specialty, no minerals, nothing. There used to be a few nomads here but they left recently. There are too many wolves here for them to raise livestock." The black wolf crept closer under Hao Ren's watchful eyes and started to sniff him out from head to toe. "You don't smell like a traveler. Travelers hardly take a bath and they stink like poop. Anyway, it's none of our business, we're just wolves." Wiping the cold sweat off his forehead, Hao Ren wondered where on earth were wolves as intelligent as this. "Then, why did you attack me?" Hao Ren asked awkwardly. He felt like a fool speaking to a group of wild beasts but he could not help it. These wolves spoke even better than humans. "Why not?" The black wolf sounded as if it was more surprised. "We need meat. You aren't meaty enough but we don't eat much. You would be more than enough to feed the pups. And we had thought you were an easy prey, no hard clothes on, no weapon in hand. But, you beat them black and blue. I'm not very happy about that." The wolf however had something most humans lacked, frankness. Still, being categorized as a dish on the menu left Hao Ren speechless. Yet, he could not blame them as far as the species was concerned. He let out a dry laugh. "Do you still want to eat meat now?" "Forget about it." The black wolf shook its head. "You're unpalatable and even stiffer than those people in stiff cloths. Plus, I'm no match for you. It seems like a bad idea to pick a fight with humans. They tend to have many strange things dangling on their bodies. No, it's simply too dangerous." At that juncture, a lesser black wolf of smaller build chimed in, "Sir, didn't you say you wanted to eat this guy?" Hao Ren marveled how he had struck the jackpot in picking the alpha out of the wolf pack. "This is all your fault." The alpha wolf roared at the lesser one. "If it weren't for you crying out for food every night, I wouldn't have had my tooth smashed. You just lost one, sir. Look at the poor kids over there. They lost almost all of their teeth." The lesser one pointed with its nose at a few wolves outside the perimeter. These were the hapless ones Hao Ren had beaten the hell out of. They scrambled in droves to attack him and bit his steel membrane shield earlier on. Those who were fortunate enough had only bicuspids left. Each of their mouths looked very much like the mouth of a newborn baby. These wolves were still bleeding in their mouths. They were licking and comforting each other pitifully. The alpha wolf sighed. "What a bad day. Human, can we leave now?" Hao Ren nodded his head, signaling his consent. Just when the pack of wolves were about to leave in droves, a thought flashed across his mind and he called out, "Wait a second, there's something else." The alpha wolf stalled. It turned around, straightened its head and scowled at Hao Ren. "Don't go too far. I too have my own pride to think about. You suffered no losses, what more do you want from me?" Hao Ren almost choked up what pride the alpha wolf had mustered when it was still begging for its life just a moment ago. However, He just shrugged it off by shaking his head. He then pointed towards the direction of the horizon. I'm going in that direction. Could you give me a lift? The silhouette of a few supposedly man-made buildings were seen far on the horizon. Hao Ren thought getting there on foot was not the brightest idea, as it would be sunrise before he could reach the place. Time was a scarce commodity in the plane of dreams. Go there. The alpha wolf glanced at the horizon by raising its head. Haven't I told you, the nomads are gone? What's left are just some mud shacks. Apparently, it was the nomadic settlement. Hao Ren nodded. Anyway, I'm going to check it out. His interest was in the trail of human activity, not the nomads themselves. He was highly curious about the plane of dreams. The alpha wolf mumbled before it turned around and said, "Ride on my back. I'll get you there." For a while, Hao Ren was indeed surprised. He never thought the alpha wolf would voluntarily give him a ride. He did not expect it. Hao Ren babbled as he got on the back of the alpha wolf. "Whoa, you're such a gentleman, wolf. Didn't you say for the sake of your pride and blah blah blah, you would never allow yourself to be ridden?" Pride? What's it for? The alpha wolf was puzzled. I just can't fathom it. Human likes to harp on the abstract even though it doesn't fill your stomach. The reason we don't like being ridden is simply because it's too cumbersome. It has absolutely nothing to do with so-called pride. I'd appreciate if you could move your butt a couple of inches because you're sitting on my waist. You'll only slow me down that way. Hao Ren perspired in embarrassment as he adjusted his sitting position. Humans' perception of the world was askew. Be it in novels, movies, or real life, people always judged others by their own yardsticks. Wolves hated being ridden because of self-pride was one case. The same misguided perception was invariably ascribed to wild horses, unicorns, etc., which perhaps was utter nonsense. The truth was, they disliked being ridden as it was cumbersome and no one loves to carry useless weight. Speaking of which, even Lily would only carry luggage, which Vivian had put on her back when she was sleepwalking. Hao Ren was tempted to think, if one could talk with a unicorn, it might allow itself to be ridden in exchange for 2 cookies. For animals, pride was simply not part of their dictionary. Ready? The alpha wolf asked before it set off, interrupting Hao Ren's train of thought. Sit tight. A wondrous life with a wondrous journey. Hao Ren felt his encounters with all kinds of wonders from the real world to the plane of dreams had never followed a normal narrative. He was riding a giant black wolf, which was as tall as a human, racing across the mysterious grassland. They were under the night sky of 2 brightly lit moons and an unfamiliar, beautiful galaxy, heading towards a horizon not of Earth. The night breeze blew into his face just as fast as he moved and the open landscape, which was covered in exotic vegetation, blurred below him. Sandwiched between the strange sky and the exotic landscape, was a traveler from another world, riding a wolf in style. He had never felt so awesome until that very moment. It would have been even more awesome if he was not in his pajamas. The night wind was freezing cold. Hao Ren would have been frozen to death if not for his enhanced body. He was not Superman, but the low temperature was not a big deal. He grabbed his pajamas close to his skin with one hand and held onto the tough guard hair on the back of the wolf with another. He then called aloud, "How big is the step?" "It's big, very big." The voice of the alpha wolf was equally loud and sonorous. "I don't know how humans measure distance, but the pack and I once ran across it for 7 days and 7 nights. Yet, we did not reach the edge. I heard there are humans beyond the steppe, but they hardly come here. This world. I mean, what have you learned about the human world?" The mention of human world struck a chord with Hao Ren. The idea that human civilization existed on the plane of dreams was incredible. He was eager to find out what these humans were like. "Have you ever been there? Do you know the way?" "Nope, it's too dangerous to go there." The alpha wolf slowed down, presumably to ease conversation. "Humans are cunning. They kill and eat everything. Even an earthworm is not spared. Going there is suicide. Speaking of which, why are you asking about that? Aren't you a human yourself?" "Well, I came from the other side." Hao Ren made a story up. "The world's a big place." The alpha wolf did not utter a word. It seemed like it had taken Hao Ren's word as it was. On the other hand, Han Ren was emotional, as intelligent as these beasts were, they lacked the craftiness of humans. Conspiracy and deception had never crossed the Alpha's mind. It was not cautious enough of Hao Ren, the one who walked on two legs, where he came from, and where he was going to sort out things. If he had to describe it, a hungry belly has no ears, questions asked are meant to be forgotten, would be an apt description. These strange beasts were forthright and spontaneous. After recognizing the fact that they were no match for Hao Ren and he was not going to be their dinner, they quickly buried the hatchet. They even allowed themselves to be ridden. Though the alpha wolf did not look particularly pleased and was possibly fearful of Hao Ren's iron fist, it was pragmatic: stay clear of trouble, and, if you can't beat them, join them, were its tenets. While it sounded cowardly, none was more disgraceful than Lily, the werewolf maiden. So, Hao Ren was cool with how the alpha was. He even felt that it was cute, in a sense. As they were just a few minutes away from the houses, something crossed Hao Ren's mind. Some time back, I ran into a pack of wolves here. I wonder if they were your wolves. You were here. The alpha wolf was surprised. I've never seen you. Alhuff, we live nearby, you're the only human we've ever seen for the last 35 days and nights. The wolves had a vague concept of time. They had a rough idea of how humans kept track of time, which was to break it down into years, months, and so on. However, they felt it was a difficult concept to grasp. Hence, they resorted to the day and night method to keep track of time. Since there was no practice of agriculture or concept of history, as long as they could anticipate the coming of winter, their crude method of timekeeping was good enough for their needs. You guys have never seen me. As the wolves were very forthright, Hao Ren believed that they would not lie to him. So, there were others. There are a few wolf packs going around. Their territories are bordering ours. Some borders are rather ambiguous, so some kids may inevitably wander across the line. The alpha wolf was displeased. Those morons are incapable of talking, much less thinking. That's the reason they're weaker and only fit to be our vassal packs, albeit insubordinate. The alpha wolf shook its head as it said, those morons would trespass and find food in our territory when they're hungry. Growling is the only means to communicate with them. It's weird that although we're both wolves yet, they're so stupid. Hao Ren listened quietly as he kept everything he had heard to himself. There were still many unsolved mysteries in the plane of dreams, but at least for now, he knew the existence of two types of wolves, one that talked and was as intelligent as humans while the other was essentially a wild wolf. They were identical in appearance. But why? Hao Ren found that it was not the result of normal evolution. Then again, this was the plane of dreams, a strange space, where things probably did not exist as per the normal sense of the world. Furthermore, traces of human activities were found in the steppe, and a large human world allegedly existed beyond the horizon. The alpha wolf called them as human packs. How many more mysteries were out there? As promised, the alpha wolf delivered Hao Ren to the man-made shacks. You've arrived. Now, I shall leave with my pack. Once Hao Ren got off its back, the alpha wolf stretched its body and said, this was my first time carrying such a heavy load. I'd make you carry me the same distance if only I had defeated you. Thank you for the ride. Hao Ren rubbed his hair as he found the alpha wolf interesting. I'll be hanging around here for a while. We may meet again. If you need anything, I'll be happy to help. The alpha wolf was a real opportunist. It nodded and immediately pointed at the poor kids which were still bleeding in their mouths. My men have lost their teeth. They won't be able to eat and will starve to death. But as the leader of the pack, I won't abandon them. Instead, I'll send a few wolves out to look for something which they can eat. Can you please help us on this? Hao Ren did not expect to witness it go straight to the point so quickly. His forehead broke out in sweat as he reached for the MDT. Hey buddy. Fix their broken teeth, would you? Sorry buddy, I am just a PDA, not Doraemon. I know a veterinary. Hao Ren turned to the alpha wolf as he wiped away the cold sweat from his forehead. Who would be more than willing to attend to your problem? If only I could bring her in. I mean bring her over here. I'll make sure she fixes the broken teeth of your wolves. I'll take your word for it, human. The alpha wolf nodded. But humans aren't known for keeping their word, so I have no high hopes for you. Goodbye, I hope we won't have to lock horns with each other the next time we meet. The alpha and its pack left right after it finished its last sentence. They ran quickly and disappeared into the grassland. Open enemies are better than false friends. I think I've met one at last, Hao Ren mumbled to himself. The MDT was surprised. Whoa, I didn't know you could be so philosophical. Hao Ren yanked the MDT out and hung it from his pocket to dry in the wind. Ignoring its statement, he walked straight towards the little house. It was the place where the nomads once lived, but it puzzled Hao Ren. As far as he knew, nomads did not usually build permanent structures. They followed the water as well as grass and only built tents. It seemed that the nomads in the plain had a different way of living. They had their unique ways of dealing with their day-to-day problems. Just as Hao Ren placed his hand on the door, all of a sudden, a strong gust of wind blew throughout the steppe. The little houses in the steppe were not what Hao Ren had imagined. However, they still had nomadic characteristics. The pillars were of solid wood and arranged in a circular layout, the walls were constructed from flexible straw mat and some unknown filler materials, the thatched roofs was secured down by placing heavy stones on top while their foundations were reinforced with baked clay. Overall, the whole structure of each house was primitive yet solid. The dozens of circular houses, which looked identical and measured approximately less than 10 meters in diameter, were scattered inside a fence perimeter, forming a village. Hao Ren did not pay attention to the surrounding environment as he was too eager to get into the house to find out how the human civilization in the Plane of Dreams was like. He pushed the door of the nearest house open. Instead of swinging open, the rattan and straw door fell down inwards. It appears that the nomads have left for a long time. Hao Ren glanced in astonishment at the rotten door frame. The door was attached by hinges fashioned from rope. The door hinges had rotten so much that they completely gave way when Hao Ren pushed against the door. Apparently, the wolf's perception of time was somewhat inaccurate. I hope this shaky structure will not give way all of a sudden, murmured Hao Ren as he entered the nomadic house. A dim light emanated from the MDT and allowed him to see in the pitch-dark interior. As expected, the house was empty, which implied that the owner left the house in an orderly manner. The floor under Hao Ren's feet was unpaved. He also noticed some fabric lying at the corners of the house. It suggested that the floor was once carpeted. On each of the wooden pillars was a metal hook which could have served as a hanger for weapons or tools. The floor in the middle of the house was visibly lower than the floor around it. A pit with a burnt mark in its center could have been a stove or fireplace. Other than that, there was not much left. Hao Ren was kind of disappointed. He did not find anything valuable, not even a small piece of sheepskin. However, the fact that these tiny little houses existed was significant. They showed that human civilization existed in the Plains of Dreams, and they could have been highly civilized with developed technologies, metallurgy, the metal hooks on the wall, construction, and survival skills in a grassland or prairie full of roaming wolves. Despite Raven 12345's briefing that the Plane of Dreams was not just a strange world with beasts and monsters, witnessing everything with his own eyes was much more real and profound. Do you know anything about the Plane of Dreams? Asked Hao Ren as he looked at the MDT dangling from his pocket. Please keep your light steady. I suggest you read the operation manual. You have been using the device wrongly. The device is a high-tech personal assistant, not a torchlight, not a meteor hammer, and much less your pet. Nevertheless, the MDT still responded to Hao Ren's question after lashing out at him. There are some limited preloaded information. This is a specialized gadget for inspectors installed only with the necessary modules. The device will search the local universe channels for more information. Search completed. The features of the Plane of Dreams are reality, size, linear development, self-consistent, capable of influencing the real world. Do you need further explanations? That would be very much appreciated, said Hao Ren as he sauntered around the house looking for possibly valuable clues. Reality, the existence of the Plane of Dreams is real. It has an effective and analyzable set of law. Although it is a warped reality, it has its own set of logic, and everything in this space is not an illusion. Size, due to various reasons, study of the Plane of Dreams has never been carried out, but, judging from the few spatial induction results, the size of the Plane of Dreams is roughly equal the size of the real world. Thus, it is something to behold. If the goddess of the space administration was to launch an exploration program for the Plane of Dreams, inspectors would be as busy as a cat on a hot tin roof. Linear development, the Plane of Dreams is a space of constant change and development. While it is a strange place, everything develops linearly in its evolving history, and each moment of its history is the result of its linear causation. As such, everything happens for a reason and there is nothing that cannot be explained. This is a new point, the authenticity of which has yet to be proven. Self-consistent, everything in the plane of dreams is self-consistent. They are an embodiment of its reality. Capable of influencing the real world, this is an utterly redundant point, of which explanation is unnecessary. Blinded by science, Hao Ren grasped only what he could understand. Suddenly, a flash of light at the corner of the house caught his attention. He dashed towards it and found that a little piece of metal protruded from the ground. His heart pounded as he looked at the metal piece, a sense of familiarity riddled him. When he finally dug the metal out of the ground, he froze. It was a diamond-shaped metal plate roughly the size of his palm. The surface was partly rusted, which meant that it was made of iron. However, one thing caught his eye, and it was the hieroglyphs on the metal sheet. He stared intensely at it for some time before realization struck him. It was the very same metal sheet he and Vivian found in his own basement. WTF? Hao Ren murmured to himself in shock, "Why is this thing in my house?" Before he could finish murmuring to himself, a strange whistling sound from outside the house interrupted him. Alternating sounds of rumbling and whistling wind were heard from all directions, followed by the rattling of the house. Hao Ren looked up instinctively. All of a sudden, the roof launched itself into the air and was blown away. The thatched roof, secured down by heavy stones, was completely gone, and the dark interior was suddenly filled with light, starlight and moonlight. The wall started shaking violently, and before he knew it, the house was completely uprooted from its foundation. The word typhoon came to mind, but it was too late. Before he could react to it, Hao Ren along with the wall were carried by the strong wind and blown up in the air. Although bioenhancement had made Hao Ren as strong as an ox and as fit as a fiddle, it did not endow him with the stability of a mountain. The typhoon carried and tossed him around like a leaf. He was pulled into the typhoon and bumped into thousands of flying debris. He became disoriented and totally hapless. However, he quickly realized that the debris he smashed into the most was not of the house but a piece of glowing, metal object the size of his palm. He burst out, "MDT! Is this revenge?" The MDT pleaded sincerely as it swung around and hit Hao Ren's head countless times. The device is unable to control itself. It is such a horrible typhoon. Horrible what? You've hit me on my face no less than 4-5 times, now. Hao Ren was furious, but he didn't lose his mind. What's going on? A typhoon in clear weather. God knows. The early warning system for disasters was not working since Raven 12345 meddled with the device. And the extreme weather radar program just passed its trial period last night. File your complaint to the higher-ups if you have the guts. You son of a b. Before he could lash out, he blacked out. A sense of weightlessness engulfed him before he felt like he was thrown violently onto solid ground. When he opened his eyes, he found himself lying in his bed in the comfort of his home. A warm ray of sunshine shone on him. It was time to wake up. The timing was preset before he entered the plane of dreams. The sensation of being tossed around by the typhoon still terrorized him. Going into the plane of dreams was indeed a test of the strength of one's heart. It took him quite a while before his heartbeat slowed down to a normal rate. But he felt something sharp pressing against his thigh. He reached for his thigh, and there it was, the diamond-shaped metal plate. The door creaked as Hao Ren pushed it. The supernatural trio, who were lounging in the living room watching television, all turned their heads in unison. Lily, who caught sight of the metal toy in Hao Ren's hand, bounced towards him screaming, "Big discovery! Big discovery!" Lily was the most agile of the lot, and she had the best reaction time among them. Before Hao Ren could even say anything, she was right in front of him in a flash, bouncing about for the metal toy. It took her a while to realize that she was reacting similarly to a pet dog, and she bashfully went back to watching the telly with her tail wagging. Hao Ren glanced nervously at Lily. "Why are you in werewolf form? Losing control again?" Lily's ears stiffened at the mention of losing control, as she was rather sensitive towards those words. She quickly brushed it aside. "Nah, just giving the tail a breather." "So, how was it?" Vivian stood up after Lily was done with her antics. "I suppose the trip to the plane of dreams was smooth." "Yeah, it was pretty smooth. I fought like 7 dozen of feral wolves and got thrown up into the sky by a vortex. I woke up after that." Hao Ren gingerly described his experience. But the key point is, I brought something back from there and it's something you're familiar with too. Vivian was just about to take a jab at Hao Ren until she saw the object in his hand. Her eyes widened in surprise. Wasn't this the thing we found in the basement a few days back? Yep, that's the one. Hao Ren grabbed Vivian by the wrist and pulled her towards the stairway to the basement. I suppose you remember where we shelved that thing. Let's look for it again. The resemblance is just uncanny. After Hao Ren and Vivian went down the staircase, Isaacs looked at Lily with a confused face. What's with the two of them? I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, they must be having an affair, Lily just blurted out without much thought. The people on the TV said so. Isaac simply nodded. After contemplating for a moment, he asked, so, when are they getting married? The next 10 or so minutes was then spent talking about the rites of marriage on Earth. They are not pertinent and can be ignored for now. Hao Ren and Vivian found the wooden box where they placed the metal toy in no time. All his tattered childhood toys in the box seemed to have worn out much further. The diamond-shaped metal object looked like a loose component in a pile of old junk. Hao Ren lifted the entire box of stuff and placed it on the study table in Vivian's room. Both of them quickly went about investigating the two metal objects. Well, not like there was much to even begin with. The objects looked identical at first glance. You're sure you brought it out from the plane of dreams? Vivian slowly stroked the pattern on the object. The one Hao Ren brought back appeared newer and the layer of rust on it was not as bad as the first one. The pattern is the same and so is the material. Yeah. Hao Ren nodded earnestly. He followed with a recap of his experience in the plane the night before, including his acquisition of the steel membrane shield, but he quickly went back to the metal object. I found it in a nomad's hut in the plains. Didn't see anything else around though, it was sitting all pretty on the ground. Oh, the hut also looked like it had been deserted for a long time. What is the plane of dreams like? Vivian had curiosity written all over her face. Does it have mountains and rivers and other humans? Like what we see in the real world? Haven't met a living person, I'm afraid. But the rest is pretty much the same as the normal world, but even the talking wolves there would form a pack. Hao Ren described what he saw in detail. He made mention of the weird pack of wolves, an endless grassland, starry skies, the small hut and of course, the most important of all, the twin moons which appeared in the plane of dreams. There were two moons there. One was bigger than the other. The small one was about the size of a fingernail while the bigger one was many times bigger than the one we have rotating around Earth. It looked really amazing at night. If only I could bring all of you there. You think Lily will go stark raving mad when she sees the twin moons? One on Earth was enough to have her waggling about. Two moons, as a vampire, Vivian was also sensitive towards moonlight and upon hearing his story, a faint glow appeared in her eyes. I do want to see it. Please bring me there someday. Oh yeah, I also dreamt about seeing two moons a long time ago. It's still fresh in my memory like it was just yesterday. Under the protection of the moon I finally got rid of my ill luck and I was filthy rich, only to be woken up by the landlady, screaming for rent money. Hao Ren as usual, had no response to Vivian's past, which was worthy of a soap opera. Vivian regaled Hao Ren with her dream of being filthy rich and it took her a good while to snap back to reality. She quickly wiped her saliva off the side of her mouth and became serious again. She fiddled with the two metal objects. It seems like both of these objects were brought out from the plane of dreams. It's quite impossible for someone in the real world to create something so similar to something from the plane of dreams. Furthermore, it looks like useless junk. You mentioned that you got this when you were young. Do you remember anything about it? Nope, not a clue. Hao Ren shook his head. Like I said, it just somehow appeared without me noticing it. Then, there are two possibilities. Someone went into the plane of dreams before and brought the first one out. After that, it ended up in your hands, somehow. Raven 12345 did mention that many people had entered the plane and brought something out. You're not the first and you won't be the last. Vivian wiggled her fingers as she continued, the second possibility is that you went there when you were still a kid and the metal object was brought out by you. Which sounds more plausible to you? Hao Ren took both the metal objects from Vivian and looked at them. After contemplating for a moment, he shook his head. Neither sounds plausible at all. Too much coincidence for the first. Based on what that crazy goddess said, it takes a few centuries for someone to communicate with the plane of dreams and come out alive, much less bring something out from it. And for that item to end up with me after all this time. Nope, don't think so. For the second one, I was about 5. With men-eating wolves running about or strong gales enough to topple buildings, with both my entries into the plane almost being fatal. If not for the body-strengthening hack that I have. The possibility of me entering and coming out of the plane of dreams at that age is nil. That said, I don't even remember anything like this. However, the chances of the second possibility happening is a bit higher. Vivian tapped Hao Ren's shoulder. You just need to be super lucky. Besides, most children don't remember things well and they tend to avoid bad memories naturally. So, there is a possibility that just simply forgot about it. Don't you see me forgetting things most of the time? Hao Ren glanced at her but did not dare to retort. It's because you're a bloody grandma, for God's sake, he wisely kept his thoughts to himself. What do you think this does? Hao Ren quickly diverted the topic to avoid verbalizing his thoughts. Seems like an accessory, Vivian guessed. A small metal object like this, no sharp edges on it and not particularly sturdy. It doesn't look like a weapon or a tool either. I think it's a bit like an heraldic accessory, something you see engraved on walls and whatnot. A nomad practicing heraldry. Well, who can be sure of what's going on there? Hao Ren pondered, and thought that there was some truth to that. The place had wolves speaking like Beijing opera actors. Granted, he was using the translation function of the MDT, so, who's to say what's real and what's not? The origin of the metal object still remained a mystery to them, and Hao Ren had no recollection of obtaining the item in the first place. Nonetheless, he could now be sure that the item originated from the plane of dreams. Raven 12345 said that the plane was a web that connected to the real world. Based on the evidence they had at the moment, Hao Ren and Vivian had a slightly better understanding on the matter. There were the 2 metal objects and a ball of wolf fur that he brought out earlier. Hao Ren decided to store them in a sturdy metal box. He thought that he would probably come across even more interesting items from the plane of dreams and decided to start collecting them. A few days passed without much happenings, but soon, there was going to be a full moon. It was time for Lily to undergo her evolution. It was the night of a full moon, the night Raven 12345 reckoned that Lily would go through with her transformation. Hao Ren and his tenants had been busy making preparations for the event since the break of dawn. Although truthfully, no one knew exactly what to prepare for. Lily was a vagabond who had never met her kind before. She only knew that her kind were called werewolves from TV. Isaacs too had never seen a werewolf in his world, while Hao Ren's knowledge of the lycanthrope came from movies. The only person who had any inkling, however little, of the ritual was Vivian. Yes, the vampire who was a bitter enemy of the wolfen. Vivian had taken leave the previous night to look for herbs and other peculiar ingredients. She knew of some remedies from times long past, which were used by the werewolves during special rituals. Most of the remedies revolved around pacification and mental control, given that they were a race that went berserk very easily. Training their mental fortitude was a big challenge in all their rituals. Given this particular need for their kind, the werewolves were rather proficient in making herbal poultices for the mind. Vivian had a long and difficult relationship with the werewolves. Through that, she managed to get hold of some of their secrets. As a precaution against Lily losing control at the height of her evolution, to be honest, it was more like they could not and would not trust Raven 12345's words. Vivian labored the entire day to prepare the poultices. As for Lily, she was the most carefree of the lot. By Hao Ren's instructions, she was to sit at home and relax. She was even forbidden to go out and play with the dogs in the streets. She was supposed to rest up so that she would be able to withstand the strain of her evolution. Furthermore, to appease the hyperactive pup, Hao Ren prepared a giant pot of roasted pork ribs for her, and the pup was now glued to the television munching on the ribs. Hao Ren supposed that it was for the best. As he and Isaacs had zero idea on how to deal with a werewolf, they went to town to get some essentials for the night. Lily's transformation was expected to take a few hours at least. The prevailing theory was from moonrise to sunrise, and she cannot be left alone during the evolution. Hence, Hao Ren, Vivian and Isaacs had to be present. Having to stand watch under the stars guarding a rampaging werewolf was not something to scoff at, and the necessary preparations were needed. No one was sure how or what Hao Ren had looked up on the internet, but he somehow managed to cobble together a to-buy list. The list included a cheap and sturdy mat, a disposable tent, a camping lamp, a huge bundle of rope and a box of snacks. When he first showed the list to Vivian, it gave her a shock. At first, the vampire thought Hao Ren was going to perform a field delivery for Lily and run off with her. She was finally convinced by Hao Ren that he was merely preparing some survival tools. While the southern suburbs was a small locale, the supermarkets there had pretty much all the items Hao Ren had indicated in the list, except for the tent. It was a given since it was not something you would normally use. Accompanied by Isaac as he went about shopping, both of them quickly ticked off the shopping list, except for the tent. Isaac was lugging 2 big shopping bags as they stepped out of the supermarket. The bags were stuffed to the brim with the items they just bought. Since they could submit a claim to Raven 12345 later, Hao Ren did not spare any expense. "Mr. Landlord, why are those people staring at us?" Isaac felt uncomfortable at the looks the crowd was giving him. Hao Ren supposed that the great demon had still not fully recovered from the traumatizing experience in his own world. Moreover, Isaac had pretty much been cooped up at home for the past 2 days. The moment he went out with Hao Ren, a sense of discomfort threatened to overwhelm him. Besides, why did the cashier hold her hands in the air the moment I stepped into the store? Hao Ren could only look at the 7-foot giant of a man who had a vicious look eternally plastered on his face. As for the vibe he gave out, much like a murderous devil who had been under lockdown for years. Hao Ren muttered to himself, "It's not us, it's you, and that face of yours." Isaac could consider himself lucky for not getting locked in the slammer by the local police. Moreover, the way the demon carried himself was extremely direct. The moment they stepped into the supermarket, Isaac, without as much as a word, slammed the shopping list onto the counter and commanded at the top of his voice, "You lot, get me the items on this list here." The poor cashier girl broke into tears the moment Isaac pulled that stunt. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out the cash tray from the register and handed it over to Isaac. She then left the counter with her hands held in the air. Hao Ren sensed that something was amiss and darted out to check on what went wrong. The first thing he saw was an old Liberation Army man hiding by the cabbage rack, dialing 110. Thankfully, he reacted quickly. Also, thank goodness he purchased a boatload of items so the manager did not ask for any compensation for the anguish caused. Having recalled that scene, Hao Ren shook his head and sighed. Isaac clearly had very little idea on how society functioned there, and he started to explain in detail. He did brief Isaac on the matter of supermarkets and the process of purchasing items. However, because it was short and coupled with Isaac's misunderstanding, things were a mess. He knew that deep down, the demon had a kind heart and was a very affable poor demon. He simply wanted to help, but this was a time where the face mattered, and by the looks of things, Isaac scared everyone away with just a glance. Such is the society nowadays. Isaac frowned at Hao Ren's attempt to explain. Superficial indeed, the way your society sees things. In my world, the most respected are the most hideous to look at. Demons, humans, even those pompous elves knew the value and honor a battle-scarred look brings. The sense of beauty in this world is way off. People should not be wearing justice and conscience on their sleeves. Hao Ren almost snickered at the notion of a demon talking to him about justice and conscience. What a revelation indeed. He knew Isaac was different from most demons, but this was a difference on a whole new level. It even surpassed the insane goddess. Isaac's face glowed with a saintly halo when he spoke of justice and conscience. Hao Ren simply could not figure out how to react to that. This is a societal issue. Pay no heed to it. Hao Ren laughed wryly and patted Isaac on the shoulder. That said, are you clear about the process of purchasing stuff? A supermarket is different from your sundry shops and control your volume when you speak. I know. There are merchant stalls in my world, and I know money is a good thing. Isaac shrugged. I may be a demon, but I have also wandered within the human society as well. The men there are as sly as your kind here. They could even sell oil mixed with rice gruel to the gnomes. Hell knows where they got that idea from. Hao Ren was curious about the world which Isaac hailed from. It sounded like the typical fantasy world you would see in a fantasy novel. However, he knew that Isaac was rather sensitive about the topics of his home world, and Hao Ren just left it at that. As the two were walking towards a crossroad, they heard a song in a distance. Hao Ren looked around and saw that a young lass was performing in front of a shop, the melodious tune coming from her guitar. Buskers were a common sight in the main towns or train stations, but, for a place like the southern suburbs, it was a rare sight indeed, and Hao Ren stopped to have a better look. The girl was petite. She was clad in a loose gray sweater and a pair of dusty-looking jeans. She had slightly dark skin, fair as well as supple features and a ponytail, which dangled from the back of her head. She was not exactly a beauty, but she had a quiet and cute charm about her, especially when she pursed her lips. While Hao Ren was mesmerized for a few seconds, the girl started singing again. The song played from her portable sound box. "She sings pretty well," Hao Ren muttered to himself. "But what language is that?" The busker by the road had managed to catch Hao Ren's attention as well as the crowd in the area. Perhaps it was due to the fact that busking was a rare sight in town. She immediately became the focus of the crowd. There are 3 types of street performers in this age. One is the poor musician who dons a pair of sunglasses and plays the arrow, playing nameless melancholic tunes. Then, there is the one who is blind to his or her lack of talent but plays anyway for the sake of making a point. The last type is what Hao Ren would call a true street performer, one with real talent. The young lass across the road may have looked like an amateur, but Hao Ren thought that she belonged to the third type. Her clothes appeared a little worn, but her appearance was well kept. A cheerful glow radiated from her youthful face, and at the very least, she seemed to have more money than that pauper of a vampire at home. Her music had the ability to make one stop and listen. However, the melody was foreign to Hao Ren, perhaps a self-composed tune. It did not sound anything like the popular music on radio, but it gave off a forlorn feeling, making one think of the vast plains and gentle breeze. Hao Ren was usually skeptical about the whole notion of music lifting one's soul, but this changed his mind. As the girl started to sing her nameless song, Hao Ren had never heard of the language before. It was as if she was just humming at will. There was no meaning to the lyrics of the song, and the tune could have just been made up on the go. Even Isaac had to stop and listen. After a while, he frowned. "I don't understand it. Is the translation module malfunctioning?" "Yo, MDT." Hao Ren poked the device in his pocket, which was in sleep mode. "Listen and tell me, what language is that? Our translation database doesn't seem to have any information on it." A short background music played, signaling that the MDT was starting up, and after a few seconds, it said, "No structure, no logic, and undecipherable intonation. The system concludes that these sounds have no need for translation. They are just meaningless sounds." Hao Ren pondered for a while and came up with a simple explanation. "So, you mean that the lady has forgotten the lyrics and she's just making things up? Can't you read the atmosphere when you speak?" The MDT vibrated in his pocket. "It's such a melodious song. Can't you just say that she's singing from her soul than forgetting the lyrics? That said, I do think that she forgot the lyrics." The girl across the road had also seemed to take notice of them. Perhaps she noticed Isaac first, given that the demon was a good 7 feet tall. She looked at Hao Ren and greeted him with a sweet smile. Hao Ren, of course, did not know who the lady was, and he returned a courteous smile. He then left with Isaac. He still had things to prepare for Lily's transformation that night and could not waste his precious time. As they were about to step into the house, the MDT sounded again. "Say, the lass did greet you right. Shouldn't you at least have given her a tip or two? I have checked that this is a norm on Earth." Hao Ren thought of the matter for a while, and his face exhibited an expression of a maintaining peace. "You heard the song, right? Such a carefree melody. I don't think this can be measured by money. Sure, she was busking, but I think giving her a smile is worth more than a few bucks. But as you left, the lady did roll her eyes and muttered something about you." Hao Ren had no response to the MDT's jibes. Could the talkative device not give him a peace of mind? Vivian was home by the time the two got back. The vampire was out and about since the last night. She did not return until past noon. It seemed like she flew somewhere real far to collect her ingredients. Hao Ren saw the vampire busy pounding herbs in the mortar. She seemed to be preparing some herbal remedies. Vivian looked up and saw the gigantic bag in Isaac's hand and asked, "Whoa, that much?" "Just in case Lily gets hungry after transforming. I read that werewolves get a very voracious appetite after transforming, so I got her 20 packets of spicy strips and 10 packets of bread." This can at least ensure that she won't run into town hungry and end up hurting innocents. Lily cheered at the mention of snacks and pounced on Hao Ren from the sofa. Grabbing a packet of spicy strip, she went back to the sofa and started munching on it. Vivian looked at Hao Ren in horror. 20 packets of that. What were you thinking? Well, she likes it. Hao Ren gave Lily a look similar to one who was spoiling a pet. Besides, the spicy strip is rather filling. I heard from Raven 12345 that spicy stuff helps with her evolution. I've never heard of that before, Vivian pouted. You better prepare some 10 bottles of drinking water then. There may come a time when Lily needs to dip in cold water. My goodness, that thinking of yours, why is it more and more like that goddess? Raven 12345 status as a goddess usually commanded awe and respect while Hao Ren would casually diss her. Vivian retained that sense of awe and dared not call the goddess a crazy witch. Clearly, the vampire took the matter of religion rather seriously. Hao Ren then helped Azax place the bags on the dining table and he shifted towards Vivian as she continued to pound the herbs. What are you doing? That looks disgusting. F***ck. That smell. Vivian had placed old newspapers over the table and on them were an array of herbs that looked no different than your typical weed. However, it was clear that Vivian took a lot of effort in finding the ingredients. Some of them still had the scent of soil. Vivian had cleaned some of the herbs and carefully placed them aside. Next to the herbs was a collection of soil, wood chips, moss and pebbles that had been separated from the herbs. At first glance, one would have thought that they were plucked up from a garbage can. Vivian, on the other hand, was carefully preparing the herbal solution, pounding some and mixing the others. This one here is made out of 3 different dried herbs. After mixing with rabbit blood and water, it will serve as a strong stabilizing agent. Normal people will probably go into a coma drinking it, but it will have a calming effect on a werewolf. Vivian explained the various herbs that she was preparing. This ash-like powder is incense. I'll need to mix it with wormwood extract and mold it into a cookie-like shape. We'll need to light it up when Lily transforms and it will suppress her desire to attack anything. It's a common item found in the werewolves' coming-of-age rituals. I'm sure I got the mixture right. The moss there, I got it from the cemetery. Took me a while to find the proper one. It will be able to focus spiritual energies. Werewolves are a race that have more brawn than brains and they lack the necessary spiritual strength, thus, things like these are required. Vivian had yet to finish her lecture when Hao Ren showed signs of wanting to vomit. Surely, no one could have been able to withstand the stench of those things. But, they were important ingredients for the herbal concoction needed for Lily's transformation that night. Hao Ren's stomach turned at the very thought of consuming the concoction. He glanced at Vivian and felt that something was up from the vampire's eyes. Tell me, honestly, this is revenge against Lily, isn't it? Vivian smiled. Mr. Landlord, look me in the eye and you'll find out. Hao Ren sighed. It was revenge indeed. Lily, however, did not detect anything amiss and she was still munching on the spicy strips. She was watching her favorite soap opera, totally not paying any attention to the items on the table. Hao Ren took the chance to tease her. Lily, look at Vivian preparing these for you. You'll need to eat them later tonight. Lily turned around and sniffed. Oh, okay. I'll eat anything. Hao Ren did not know how to respond to that. This omnivore of a werewolf was beyond saving. The bright moon and little stars were hanging in the cloudless sky. It was a good day to do something important like howling at the moon, for instance. Under the moonlight, 4 silhouettes were sneaking out of the back door of Hao Ren's big house. They were like a thieves carrying a few bags and rushing straight into the wilderness. Why do I feel like we're about to do something bad? Vivian turned into a vampire and floated in the air leisurely, half a meter above the ground ahead of them. She was the most graceful and relaxed one among them. She looked back at the dim lights far behind her, slightly sighed and said, "The humans are such a wonderful race. They are so small and weak but they can manage a city and home so well. As someone from the Blood Clan, I feel like I can't really leave a beautiful place like this. So, I am right. You are poor and sentimental." Lily strode along beside Hao Ren, lively and cheerful like a little rabbit. She did not forget to seize the opportunity to make fun of Vivian and said, "I, as a senior literary and artistic young woman, am not as sentimental as you." Can you two please not quarrel at this critical moment? Hao Ren was the only one who was a little nervous. As he kept a watchful eye on Lily, he explained to Vivian, we must act quietly. Although this area is considered remote, places like this aren't lacking in bold and bored old men as well as women. Uncle Zhao from the east side of the street has a hobby of catching rabbits with his dog at night. Sometimes he doesn't go home until 12 o'clock at midnight. Let's be careful not to bump into them. We'll be fine when we get a little farther. The closer Lily got to the wild, the happier she was. She leapt forward as she walked. She circled around him happily and chattered loudly, aha, landlord, is this what you're worrying about? Don't worry, I've talked to Huang. It's pretending to be sick and won't be coming out to catch rabbits tonight. And I've greeted the other dogs on the street. None of them are going out tonight. If their owners want to go out, they'll pretend to be sick right away. Anyway, nobody will go to the heath. Hao Ren stumbled. Vivian and him looked at Lily in surprise and thought, the innate skills of an animal could also be used in such a way. Lily had been busy on the street the past 2 days not to greet the neighbors, but to build a good relationship with the local dogs. 4 of them were not ordinary people. Hao Ren could now pat his chest and claim to be part superhuman. They walked swiftly and very soon they had moved away from the last gleam of light in the southern suburbs. They finally reached a rather open heath. As the last man-made light disappeared behind them and the starlight in addition to the moonlight dominated the sky, everyone was under the illusion that they were far from human civilization. However, the place was not as pristine as the prairie in the Plain of Dreams. Hao Ren was very impressed by the brilliant Milky Way and 2 bright moons there. He felt that there was no sky as pure and clean on Earth. Let's settle down here. Isaacs carried 2 of the biggest packs of stuff and walked behind them. The honest and genuine, big demon volunteered to be the porter. He put the things on the ground and then ran to a large stone nearby. He stood on it and looked around. Well, it's nice here, view of the road and flat terrain. Even if Lily loses control later, Vivian and I will have enough space to cast the spells. Why are all of you waiting for me to lose control? Lily blinked and sounded a little unhappy. You guys have been talking about what to do if I get out of control since we left the house. Don't you guys trust me? It's not that I don't trust you, I don't trust that psycho. Hao Ren bent over to dig out the plastic sheeting in the big bag they prepared earlier. He spread the sheeting on the ground, shook his head and sighed. Do you know, that woman is a mechanical idiot. There is only one main button on the bioenhancement and reconfiguration chamber and she still pressed the wrong one. Can you believe it? There's a big chance of things going wrong whenever she handles. Before Hao Ren could finish his sentence, a loud thunder suddenly struck from the clear sky. A blinding flash of lightning slashed across the cloudless sky from the southeast. Hao Ren was frightened and he stopped talking. The rest of them were also startled. Nobody knew why there was thunder in such a nice weather until the MDT slowly said, be careful, she is a goddess after all. The fundamental law of the world revolves around her. Scolding her behind her back, you better watch out for lightning. So petty. Hao Ren's neck was covered in cold sweat but, he still stubbornly muttered, can't even say anything behind her back. She isn't petty at all. She doesn't mind even if you call her a psycho in front of her face. She just doesn't care. The MDT sounded a little cocky and continued, but the world cares. God's punishment is an automatic program and it's ideal for supervising employees' behaviors. Ahem, let's get down to business, said Hao Ren. Lily had already emptied the bags and piled the snacks up on the ground. A few large sheets of plastic and blankets that Hao Ren bought came in handy. Hao Ren spread them on the ground and they became a place where Lily rolled happily. Vivian then fixed a few disposable stands on the ground and put a cool lamp on it for lighting. Isaac sorted the snacks and drinks that had 1/3 of their portion consumed by Lily at home. There was still a lot left. Lily jumped merrily into the pile of snacks. After the bursting sounds of tearing wrappers, she held several packs of snacks in both hands and started eating. Hao Ren looked at the scene in front of him and got a little confused. Why does this look like we're having a picnic? Vivian looked up at the gradually rising moon. She could not help but poke Lily in the arm and said, stop eating. Do it now. Lily's mouth was stuffed with spicy strips and replied in a slurred voice, huh? I mean shape-shifting, you idiot. Vivian was so impatient that the pitch of her voice changed. All of us skipped sleep for you. We are not here to just watch you eat the spicy bar. The prime time of the full moon will last just a few hours. You better do it now. Lily reacted after a few seconds and quickly swallowed the snack in her mouth. She held her breath for a moment and then exhaled. Haa. Shortly after, a pair of pointy, wolf ears appeared on Lily's head, a tail appeared in the back of her body, and her hair turned into silvery, waist-length locks. Other than that, nothing else changed. And Hao Ren looked at Lily hopefully. Aren't you going to evolve? Lily was also looking curiously at her wagging tail. She also touched her ears to confirm its position and size. She looked puzzled and said, nothing else I guess. I don't feel the urge to evolve into something else. Maybe it's not time yet. Vivian found a reasonable excuse and explained, I feel that the power of the moonlight hasn't peaked yet. Lily will probably start to evolve right at the moment of the full moon. They had to wait. Isaacs handed the drinks and snacks to them at once. He then conjured up a fiery red demon stone out of the air and placed it on the open ground nearby. He said, anything you guys want to heat up? I'll do it. Hao Ren quickly waved his hand and said, take your stone a little farther. Be careful, don't burn the blanket. They used rare demon's fire just to keep warm and barbecue, but Hao Ren loathed it. He was probably the only person in the world who would loathe the demon's fire. 4 of them started to eat and drink under the brilliant moonlight. As time went on, the full moon soon rose above their heads. Hao Ren felt something amiss. Why hasn't anything happened yet? Vivian also frowned and said, the power of the moonlight has indeed reached its peak. I can feel it. Why isn't Doggy reacting? Lily was eating delightfully. She did not notice them talking about her. She was surrounded by a stack of snack bags and even smeared grease on her forehead. The silly girl completely indulged herself that night. However, Hao Ren was getting more and more worried. He was afraid that the 5-digit goddess had pushed the wrong button when she treated Lily. Therefore, a few minutes later, he picked up the MDT and said, please call Raven 12345. Raven 12345 answered half a minute later. Hello. Hao Ren. What's the matter? Her voice sounded a little languid. Hao Ren told her about the situation and asked anxiously, Lily's still the same. The moon is going to disappear soon. You see. Is there something wrong? Raven 12345 was unusually silent. This silence immediately made Hao Ren tense. Then he heard Raven 12345 speaking in a low tone. Have you ever heard of the phrase, the moon turns perfectly round the day after Mid-Autumn Day? This was the only moment in Hao Ren's life that he could not resist the urge to punch someone in the face. Have you ever heard of the phrase, the moon turns perfectly round on the day after Mid-Autumn Day? Raven 12345's tone was low and slow, which sounded rather serious at first. However, Hao Ren saw through her right away. She was actually trying to sound serious to hide her guilt. Do you know what's on my mind? Said Hao Ren in a harsh tone as he grinded his teeth. Raven 12345 was not afraid of him. Her voice sounded free and easy. I know it. You want to die with me. Let me tell you, there are lots of people who want to die with me in this universe. You have to line up to the end of the world. Hao Ren threw the MDT aside. He had no way to deal with the neurotic, thoughtless, and shameless goddess. The MDT protested loudly at the moment it was thrown away. Can you please treasure your own device? Even if you have problems with your boss, you can't release your anger on me. Everyone throws their cell phones when they lose a fight. You have no choice, Hao spoke as he squinted at it. He then waved at them and said, get up everybody. Let's go back. There's nothing we can do today. Hao Ren and Raven 12345 communicated telepathically and the rest of them did not hear the conversation. Isaac stood up in confusion. He asked curiously while he packed, what did the goddess say to you? She said, the moon turns perfectly round on the day after Mid-Autumn Day and I was planning how to die with her. The rest of them were speechless. Why did we meet such a boss? Even the usually gentle and polite Vivian could not help but lose her temper. After looking blank for a moment, she started packing the stuff and continued nagging. Lily was still squatting on the blanket with a mouthful of spicy strips and mineral water. Vivian became even angrier when she saw Lily looking like a loser and she said, "Doggy, can you please do something? You look like this has nothing to do with you. Get up, I'm packing stuff. Go home and eat." "Doggy. Doggy, why aren't you talking?" Vivian called Lily a few times but she did not seem to hear it. Her head was slowly drooping as if she was sleeping while eating. A few seconds later, her shoulders began to tremble and a strange voice emerged from her throat. From the previous experience, Hao Ren sensed that something was wrong instantly. He stepped forward, patted Lily on the shoulder and asked, "Lily, what's wrong with you? Do you feel sick?" Lily trembled violently for a moment. Then, she looked up in a daze. Her golden eyes were unusually bright in the moonlight, which rippled with a glimmering halo. Her cheeks were covered in an unusual flush and her pupils were erratic. She looked like she was feeling excited after getting drunk. "Landlord. Ha. I feel a little bit numb. Hands and feet are a bit itchy. She's going to transform." Hao Ren immediately remembered when he spoke to Raven 12,345 2 days earlier. She told him about the characteristics of Lily's evolution. He jumped back more than a meter instinctively. Vivian and Isaac stopped what they were doing after hearing what he said. The big demon and vampire went up to her. Vivian carefully observed Lily's eyes. She then waved everybody back and said, "It has begun, everybody retreat. She may be more dangerous than we can imagine after she evolves. It's different from what I've seen in other wolves." Hao Ren looked at the moon, puzzled. "Didn't she say, the moon turns perfectly round on the day after Mid-Autumn Day? I really can't trust what that crazy woman says." Vivian attentively observed Lily's situation. Finally, her gaze fell on the last half packet of snacks in Lily's hand. It surprised her. This is probably the first werewolf I've ever seen that evolved not because of the moonlight but because of eating too many spicy strips. Even Isaac could not help but stagger. He packed up their things as he said, "Ever since I met you guys, I feel like the first half of my life was wasted. What I've experienced these past few days have been so much more than that in the first half of my life." All of them were busy except Lily, who was almost out of control. Vivian packed up their stuff too while Isaac ran to an open area about 100 meters away. He sketched something on the ground and summoned some green runes. Hao Ren remembered the instruction given by Raven 12345. He set the MDT to reconnaissance mode, circled it around Lily a couple of times and began to gather information of the energy field nearby. This was one of the reports he needed to hand into Raven 12345. At this point in time, Lily's body had just experienced little changes but she was sober, at least that moment. It seemed like Raven's treatment had not gone wrong yet. Watching everybody being busy, she did not want to just sit there, doing nothing. "Landlord, what should I do?" "You just need to sit here quietly. If you have any discomfort, remember to tell us immediately." Hao Ren gestured Lily to sit down and then he threw the MDT on the ground nearby and said, "You just stay there as a detector." The MDT shouted immediately, "Hey, wait. What if she loses control after turning into a beast and eats me?" Hao Ren agreed. It was said that werewolves would have a strong appetite after transforming and they would eat whatever they could get. Thus, he ran to Vivian to get a few pieces of stomach medication and gave them to Lily. "Take them. Eat 2 pieces when you have indigestion. They absolutely work." The MDT could only say, "Damn you." Everything was quickly tidied up. Vivian packed up and brought them to the defense area, which Isaac sketched out with the demonic runes. There was only one blanket left at Lily's feet. At that moment, the unusual phenomena around the werewolf maiden had become apparent to ordinary people. A passive cyclone swirled around her. The abnormal radiance of green light glowed in the rapidly growing whirlwind. Hao Ren could feel a burst of alternating hot and cold air while he stood 20 meters away from Lily. They could not go any farther. The green whirlwind was as sharp as a blade and the gravel on the ground would have been broken into half just from touching the cyclone. The blanket at Lily's feet had been cut like a mosquito coil. Hao Ren was not yet ready to compare the hardness of his steel membrane shield with Lily's sharp whirlwind. The werewolf girl, who was the key person, stood in the middle of the unusual phenomenon. A small area beside her was extremely calm, which was as safe as the eye of a typhoon. Lily was certainly not afraid of the peculiar phenomenon she had caused, and she curiously observed the cyclone around her. When she found that she could slightly control it, she immediately cheered up and said, "Landlord, I can unleash magic too. Batty can't say I'm stupid anymore." The remark showed that her mind was still restrained. Hao Ren made a gesture of encouragement to Lily and ran to the safe zone 100 meters away. The so-called safe zone was a prototype space covered with green demonic runes. Isaacs used the runes to conjure up a layer of protection from the air. The runes floated in the air a few centimeters off the ground and kept moving as if they were alive. Although it looked a little scary, there was no need to worry about the protection. The momentum is very strong. The werewolf of your world is really an interesting creature. It will even go through such an explosive growth. Isaac stood in the middle of the runes, holding his arms up and watching Lily's condition with great interest. Something's changing. Pretty much just as Isaac finished speaking, the cyclone around Lily burst out all of a sudden. The scene was like heavy bullets crashing onto the ground. The originally gentle, green whirlwind unexpectedly exploded in all directions after an abrupt contraction. Countless green shock waves spread out from the center, where Lily was. The shock waves were massive and threw sand as well as stones everywhere. An entire layer of the ground was abruptly cut down in a fraction of 1 second. The demonic array where the three of them stood in suddenly burst into an intense beam. All the runes rose up into the air. A layer of green shield blocked the shock waves that rushed at them just in time. However, the situation outside the shield was completely obscured. The distance of 100 meters seemed a little too close to Lily. Why, Zax's judgment of Lily's power was wrong. The three of them were basically in the radius of the blast. Oh whoa. Suddenly, they heard a distant howling coming from the clouds and the surrounding shock waves instantly subsided. Isaac removed the shields and Vivian blew away all the haze with her gale. Then, an astonishing scene materialized before them. The flat ground had become unrecognizable. In front of Hao Ren was a flat concave ground with the radius of 100 meters. The green shock waves had cut the area abruptly into a bowl-shaped pit, and he was standing at the edge of the pit. A giant beast stood tall and upright in the middle of the pit. The beast was 7 or 8 meters tall. Despite standing on all fours, she looked as strong and powerful as Isaac in his demon form. Her hair was as white as snow with some black markings on her face and shoulders. This was the completely evolved Lily. Hao Ren's eyes first fell on her ears and tail. The upright triangular ears and snow-white wagging tail were exactly the same as the ones Lily had in human form. It was simply the same Lily who had been magnified many times. Why do I feel that she looks a little bit different from a wolf? Vivian could not help but mutter after she tilted her head and looked at Lily for a long time. Lily was still immersed in the excitement of her complete evolution. She looked up at the round moon. Again, she howled loudly and powerfully, "Oh whoa. Woof." Vivian finally clapped her hands and said, "Isn't that a husky?" Lily's evolutionary process was more rapid than expected. It took a few minutes from the appearance of the unusual phenomenon to the completion of her transformation. However, the process was still intense. A large area within a 100-meter radius turned into a bowl-shaped pit because of the wind pressure during her transformation. The soil and rocks within the range were gone. After the most violent shock wave ended, Lily had turned into a giant beast of 7 or 8 meters in length and about 3 meters in height. That was bigger than Charlie. Her height alone already implied that she was as powerful and fierce as Isaac when he appeared in front of them for the first time. However, it seemed that only her body size made her look rather powerful and fierce. Vivian stretched her neck and kept looking at Lily for quite some time. When she heard another "whoa, woof," she finally confirmed it and said, "That's really a husky. Stop joking. We're getting down to business." Of course, Hao Ren did not believe it at first. He did not take Vivian's words seriously. He felt that she just wanted to seize the opportunity to make fun of the dumb werewolf. And to be fair, he believed that the giant canine in the pit was indeed a wolf. From the body size to the powerful vibe, they all belonged to a wolf. Although the contours on her face were slightly softer. However, based on the murderous eyes, triangular upright ears and sharp teeth, she looked just like a wolf from all angles. It was just the woof that puzzled him. I'm not joking. Vivian glanced at Hao Ren and said, although huskies and wolves look alike, you can still tell the difference if you look closely. I've dealt with werewolves for thousands of years and I've seen how some wolves evolved into different kinds of dogs. Do you think I can't tell? Hao Ren was instantly stunned. He noticed that Vivian did not look like she was joking at all. The vampire maiden looked totally serious as though she was simply stating the truth. He could not seem to believe it and asked, "You're saying, this is a husky?" Vivian nodded vigorously. Hao Ren was flabbergasted. He slowly turned around and looked at Lily. The huge wolf was still looking up at the moon and behaving in an insane manner. She kept howling and barking at it. Looking at the scene, Hao Ren felt that the amount of information his brain could process had reached its limit. He could not think properly. He held his head, slowly crouching down as he said, "Don't speak, let me figure it out." However, no matter how hard he tried to figure out what had just happened, the fact was already there. He had to face the truth that came crashing in. Lily revealed her true identity after her complete evolution. She was a husky, and this demolished his entire understanding of the world. She was a husky, my fellow audience and friends, young and old men, brothers and sisters. She was a husky. Not even the author could believe his own keyboard. How could Hao Ren believe it? But whether Hao Ren believed it or not, Lily was quite satisfied anyway. The dumbass felt a long-lost sense of comfort after she transformed. Her repressed power and instincts were all released. She chattered to the moon for several minutes. Then, she noticed her 3 little companions standing on the edge of the pit and she trotted happily towards them. Can you imagine what a husky with the body length of 7 or 8 meters looks like trotting merrily? Hao Ren returned to Earth due to a mild earthquake. When he looked up, he saw an unprecedentedly large pointed mouth with sharp teeth leaning down towards him. He broke out in cold sweat and shouted, "Wait a minute. Lily, what are you doing? You promised me you would keep your head all the way." "She just wants to lick you," said Vivian, who breezed to the side and spoke uncaringly. Isaacs ran even faster. The big demon directly teleported hundreds of meters away when he realized something had went wrong. "Lick me." Before Hao Ren could finish, a warm tongue descended from the sky onto his body. He felt like he had been hit head-on by a speeding car. If his body had not been strengthened, the lick could have broken half of his ribs. Lily's licking even activated Hao Ren's steel membrane shield and he found the translucent membrane shining all over his body. The membrane protected his body from being accidentally ripped off by Lily but failed to protect his new clothes. When the 2 heartless guys came to the rescue, Hao Ren looked like he had just been bombed in the Middle East. 3/5 of his clothing was inside Lily's belly. "Are you completely covered in saliva?" Vivian seemed to be asking with concern. However, she soon found that there was a layer of isolated, translucent light membrane covering Hao Ren and blocking Lily's saliva attack. She was very interested in it and asked, "Is that the steel membrane shield you were talking about? Can you let me try? Can you get me a coat first?" Hao Ren looked down at the rags on his body, on the verge of tears. Who else can communicate with Lily? She can only howl and bark now. How could Vivian get him clothes? Finally, Isaacs took off his coat and put it on Hao Ren. It looked like a jacket on Isaacs but looked like a cloak on Hao Ren. Lily was still in a state of excitement and she could not calm down. She had no idea how much trouble she had brought upon her tiny, little companions down there. She just tilted her head and looked at Vivian flying around her head. She twisted her neck like a restless puppy. "No, big dog." She would occasionally crane her neck and try to lick Hao Ren again. But Hao Ren was much smarter this time. He ran away immediately without hesitation. After all, it was not his coat. Vivian flew around Lily's head for some time. After she confirmed that the big dog was not aggressive, she moved closer to the big dog and shouted, "Doggy, can you hear me?" Lily's ear twitched slightly. She nimbly turned towards Vivian's direction and nodded vigorously. She kept panting while nodding. Additionally, her wagging tail almost threw sand and stones in all directions. Watching this, Hao Ren could only accept it even though he was not willing to believe it. He kept this girl as a wolf for 1 month but she turned out to be a husky. How could a real wolf wag its tail like that? Hao Ren confirmed that Lily could understand their words and was slightly relieved. Then he yelled, "Can you speak?" Lily opened her mouth and replied, "Ah, woo." She can understand words but can't speak. Such a dumbass. She's gotten more useless after the evolution. Vivian flapped her wings and descended gracefully. She found it both funny and annoying. I've been nervous for a whole 3 days, worrying that she would get stronger after her evolution. I think she's really become more powerful than before, said Isaacs. There were no huskies in the big demon's world. He was the only one who did not understand why Hao Ren and Vivian overreacted. This has nothing to do with combat power. Hao Ren's tone sounded strange as he explained, huskies are the benchmark of the dumbass world. A blue light was darting swiftly from the distance. The MDT, which was dumped near Lily as a detector, also called a lightning device, was heading back to Hao Ren. The hapless PDA could not resist the shock wave and ended up buried several meters under the ground. But as a result, it did not have a single scar on it. It really was a high-tech product from the Shiling Celestials. The MDT did not have time at that moment to complain. It circled rapidly around Hao Ren and asked, "What happened? Isn't the werewolf turning back into a wolf? How did it turn out to be a giant husky?" Even the MDT said the same thing. Lily's real identity was confirmed. The PDA had a biometric function. After Lily's transformation, it seemed that even her attention span had transformed into that of a husky's level. She was so close to 3 of them, but she did not pay any attention to what they were saying. The dumb girl's attention soon averted elsewhere and she began to wander around the grounds. She ran around, picked up a small stone, the size of a nether millstone, and played fetch alone. The next minute, she looked for a suitable place and dug a big hole with her front paws really quickly for no reason. Most of the time, she just trotted everywhere aimlessly. You can imagine what it was like when a behemoth was running around. However, the most obvious scene was the wagging of her tail as she ran. It was simply unbearable to look straight at Lily's innocent and naive appearance. Hao Ren thought that he would not be able to watch movies and dramas the same way again. He would not even be able to face the dictionary for the rest of his life. Hao Ren has had an imagination about what would happen to Lily after she transformed. He even pictured the process as if it was a Hollywood blockbuster movie. Not only that, he even visioned the ways of what they should do when Lily got out of control, and how Vivian would deal with the Fury Lily. Hao Ren also imagined that Isaacs would turn into demons to fight against the ferocious beast, with scenes of which he calmly gives command to save critical conditions from behind. In short, he assumed that this evening would be a bloody sleepless night for him. After all, a werewolf was about to evolve, as there were barely any professionals around who knew how to control and repress the situation, thus, losing control seems inevitable. As a result, it turned out to be a sleepless night, but there was no bloodshed to be seen. Lily seemed busy gambling and digging around. Despite of her body size, Lily was somehow radiating a harmless vibe, from her head to the tip of her tail. All the steps they had formed earlier were not needed here. To be honest, it was pretty boring to watch a 7 or 8 meter long husky running and gambling around. However, Vivian dare not even place a foot forward to stop the ludicrous dog as it seemed utterly dangerous. Lily was now in a heavy tank situation. Even if she turned out to be a husky, it could not manage to cover up her fighting powers at that moment, so perhaps the power of the werewolf had been awakened in the past. Therefore, while she was running, her feet were surrounded by a turquoise whirlwind all this time. The wind pressure was so strong that it could slit the gold and break the stones, as easily as cutting tofu. With Lily running at full speed, the turquoise whirlwind could even make her entire body shrouded in a wall of blurred wind. The power was unimaginable. Hao Ren watched as Lily ran to a small mound as soon as that area was only left with a trench. No one would doubt the werewolf girl's fighting power in this form. Her power was now deadly. Just like what Raven 12345 had mentioned, Lily was still conscious of her surroundings, but at the same time she was remarkably energetic. The werewolf girl, for the time being, must splurge on her excessive energy. Otherwise there will be no other way for her to return to her actual form. The exact principles are unknown, most likely related to the full moon, well, the power of hot strips. In short, in this case, Hao Ren and the other 2 tenants must have been here to watch a husky rolling and playing in a cute way. Well, this animal was undeniably rolling and playing adorably in Hao Ren's eyes. When will she calm down? Vivian yawned and asked as she was a nocturnal creature. However, in order to prepare Lily for all the things she needed to evolve, she clearly had not gotten enough rest within these 2 days. She was a little sleepy at this moment. I just looked at the life habits of a husky. Hao Ren pulled a long face while taking out the mobile data terminal. The information was shown via a holographic projection. Husky, lively and active, energetic, and has strong curiosity. When it starts playing, it usually does not obey the orders of the owner or anyone else. A healthy adult husky can play up to 3 or 4 hours or even a longer period. Well, it did not mention what will happen when a husky evolves, however I just recalled Lily's typical behavior. I believe her actions matches everything in this description. Vivian knelt down in dismay. She rummaged from the bag and said, "Why didn't I think of it before? Just look at her usual behavior. I should have guessed that this girl faces problems. You see, I have prepared so much incense for her, and now it's useless." Hao Ren was waiting boringly for Lily to transform back to her usual self after she eventually felt tired. At that instant, he got an idea and said, "Wait. This might work. These." Vivian weighed a few pieces of incense up and down in her hand, which emanated a strong aroma. They're made for werewolves, but they don't work on huskies. How would you know if you didn't try? Hao Ren reached out and grabbed several pieces of herbal cake. Now we have to calm Lily down as soon as possible. She's too loud. Even if this place is essentially remote, it's unlikely to guarantee that no one will be attracted here. How do we apply this anyway? You want to attempt to it? Vivian pulled the corners of her mouth and said. It's simple. Just heat it. Light the bottom with charcoal and the incense will burn slowly. But we have to let the big dog stay quietly at one corner first. The range of incense is limited after all. Isn't that easy? Hao Ren looked up at Lily and said, "She's just gambling, she is still capable of understanding our words. It should be all right to let her calm down for a few minutes. You too, whoever is able to quiet her down." Isaac and Vivian glanced at each other. At the end, the big demon sighed and said, "I'll go, I have thick skin." Isaac ran to Lily and tried to persuade her while Hao Ren immediately started setting up the right scene along with Vivian. They prepared and placed the metal box in advance, setting it up in a large open space, while burning the tangy herbal cakes with charcoal. Soon, the place was filled with a drowsy scent. Vivian's special incense was really treasure. Nevertheless, it still worked even in this sort of open environment. Hao Ren began starting to feel a little drowsy even after his body was enhanced. Hao Ren hoped that Lily did not have strong resistance to the scent. If she followed the standard playing time of a husky and kept on playing, the sun will rise soon. The communication between Isaac and Lily was quite smooth. The big demon was not scratched by Lily as well. Although the werewolf girl was particularly excited, she did not lose her senses and could still recognize her housemates. When she saw acquaintances approaching her, she would calm herself down naturally. However, it did not last longer than expected. Lily was completely unable to stay calm and sit still. Basically, she could only maintain her concentration for approximately 1 minute, and that is why she would start running and playing around again before Vivian could finish her words previously. Isaac quickly led Lily into a range of incense along with the precious 1-minute period when Lily was able to calm down. Next, the three of them will find ways together to allow Lily to sit amidst the incense. The giant husky was finally calmed. She sat properly for more than 10 meters ahead of Hao Ren. Her head, still twitching from left to right curiously, observing her surroundings with a new height. Her tail was wagging in a briskly way which helped to diffuse the incense thoroughly. Perhaps Lily was just playing a little too hard just now, therefore, she felt a little hot this instance. She put her tongue out and continuously panting herself out. This seemed to be a good in a sense that Lily nearly inhaled most of the aroma around her, and this even suffocated Hao Ren as he stepped 2 steps forward. The big dog's lung capacity was huge. Vivian looked at Lily nervously. Soon she realized that the giant husky began to slowly doze off, and the forceful beast in the air was also dispersing little by little. The incense worked. This is prepared specifically for werewolves. Vivian was surprised and continued, "It works on huskies as well." Hao Ren shrugged and said, "Wolves and huskies are close relatives after all. Werewolf, wolf, husky, Husky turns human, they are basically four species all right, said Vivian in a serious manner. There may have some blood relationship between huskies and wolves, but the other two. What the heck is this? Yes, what the heck is this? Probably this was about to be an unsolved mystery for a long period of time, and the current major issue was that the incense actually worked. The 2-story tall giant figure was smoked for several minutes within the haze. She barely could resist the drowsiness, wobbled and fell like a mountain. Bang! Even the ground was shaking thoroughly. Hao Ren saw the huge figure of Lily, which began to shrink rapidly in the haze. She was finally turning back into human form. However, before Hao Ren could see what was going on exactly, Isaacs and himself were chased away by Vivian. The vampire lady ordered them with power like a master of the house, "You two, step aside, turn your back and don't peek. My little bats are watching you. Whoever peeps shall have nothing to eat tomorrow." Hao Ren could roughly guess what was happening. He quickly dragged Isaacs and ran off to an area far away from that hideous place and waited. The big demon asked while squatting at his spot, "What happened?" "Just don't look there," Hao Ren said. But then he thought of the big demon's race, and with his instinctive curiosity, he shook his head and said, "It's difficult for you to understand. Our aesthetic standards are different." Isaacs. The two of them loitered around for a bit when all of a sudden, fluttering of a bat's wings was heard and approached them from close by. Sure enough, this was Lily's first encounter with such a thorough transformation. Therefore, the relevant professional skills are not thoroughly skilled. Her clothes were scrapped. Fortunately, they had an attentive vampire back home. Vivian even remembered to prepare a replacement dress for Lily. Although the two of them were constantly having conflicts, however, Vivian's kindness was shown at this critical moment. Landlord, landlord. Lily had recovered soon enough after she was free from the incense's range. She jumped out of Vivian's arms and onto the ground happily, grasped upon Hao Ren's arm, shook it vigorously and asked, "How was it?" "I'm very formidable, right?" At this instance, Hao Ren suddenly realized a highly difficult problem. Lily had been so excited that she began gambling around and had no idea what she had become. Now, as Lily's temporary guardian, he must find a way to explain the truth to this unfortunate girl. Now, I would rather find that crazy woman to perish together. Although her origin seemed a little peculiar, as a werewolf, Lily had good physical quality. Even after she was forced to transform back to her human form, perhaps due to the strong effects of the incense, she stood energetic as before. Right after she had turned back into human, she started chasing after Hao Ren and Vivian to gather more details about her transformation. Well, the basic idea was, I'm very powerful, right? To be honest, looking from another perspective, that's pretty powerful. Of course, Vivian would seize the opportunity to dampen the spirit of Lily. Don't get too excited. You have to figure out a solution for clothing issues. You'll ruin the clothes that you're wearing every single time you transform into another being. I'm not your nanny. I won't mingle with you all day just to bring you new clothes. Lily was calmer now. Looking upon the new clothes she was wearing, prepared by Vivian, she was grateful to the vampire whom she had always had a little prejudice of. In a very rare occasion, the werewolf girl thanked Vivian. "Thank you, I wasn't expecting this to happen. But how do you usually solve this problem? It's amazing that you often transform into a swarm of bats easily." "I'm using magic," Vivian shrugged and did not assume it was a big deal. "It's a very simple trick for me, but I'm afraid it's difficult for you." But then again, it seems that there are no other options to solve this problem with magic. Other high-order blood clans are directly using enchanted fabric to manufacture clothes to resolve this issue. Those types of clothing can be integrated with all forms of the body after being recharged, and it won't cause damages at all. As far as I know, I am the only one who has created the technique of wearing ordinary clothes without damaging the cloth while transforming. I'm such a genius. Hao Ren glanced at Vivian strangely and asked, "Do you think you have lived long enough to feel free about yourself? Why did you pursue this?" Vivian looked very serious and replied, "Because I'm poor." Hao Ren paused for a moment. A moment later, he then realized what Vivian meant when she responded. Vivian could not afford to wear the common enchanted clothes of a vampire. Well, this was a vampire who was so poor that she could not afford the clothes of her own clan and that she could only dig into all sorts of unorthodox ways to save money. What a dumb husky whom she thought she was a werewolf for decades. Both of them were actually birds of the same feather. How could they have possibly despised each other? Hao Ren waved to Lily and said, "Lily, there is one thing I have to tell you. I hope you're mentally prepared." Lily jumped to Hao Ren happily at once and said, "Just say it, my mental ability is constantly fit. Is the rent increasing next month?" What a nice girl she is. She had not realized that she was the only tenant in the house who paid the rent on time. Trustworthy girls like this were really hard to find these days. Looking at the pure smile on Lily's face, Hao Ren could not bear his heart to tell her the truth. Nevertheless he gritted his teeth and said, "Lily, are you familiar with huskies?" "Yes, the dumbass husky," said Lily while smiling. "Merely stupid but entertaining enough." "Landlord, do you want to keep one?" "No problem, I'll have a look out for you. I promise to find you a good one." Hao Ren slapped himself on the forehead and said, "Damn, I can't do it." Vivian looked even more reluctant than Hao Ren. She sighed, looked up to see the sinking moon, and threw the huge pouch between her feet to the Azax and said, "If you can't mention it now, then tell her after we have returned. Let's pack up and go home. We've been out long enough." Lily looked at Vivian and Hao Ren with confusion. She could not figure out why both of them seemed hesitated. Fortunately, she stopped focusing on the problem in a wink of time, then started running around merrily and helped the others pack up their stuff. After all, she was a husky. Hao Ren seemed troubled after having a glimpse at the messy spots and asked, "What are we going to do here? This place looks like a bombed scene and 100-meter radius sinkhole is placed over there. I'm afraid trouble will approach soon if we don't tidy up." Azax immediately knew that it was his turn to do something. He yelled, and with sparks gushing out from his mouth, "All of you step back." Hao Ren slapped against the Azax's back. The force was so hard that it numbed his hand, and asked, "Could you please avoid using meteorites at all?" "Forget it, just leave it there," said Vivian. "Just some big pits. There are no supernatural substances left, people can't figure out any way from this. Or it will affect locals who stole the lust to be fined again. Hurry up. I am not willing to stand here any longer. The incense makes me dizzy. The incense seems a little too strong." So with Lily's hyper-evolution, which left Hao Ren speechless, has ended satisfactorily. 4 of them carried the bags and left the unrecognizable land, leaving only the pungent incense which can vanish itself in the morning, along with the gullies and big pits on the ground. This is sure to become another hot topic of the old folks who live around the southern suburbs in the next few days. However, it does not have nothing to do with Hao Ren. The full moon was gradually sinking, starlight began fading gently, and the wilderness has silenced. Everything seemed to have settled here. Soon, a cloud of dark smoke suddenly appeared from nowhere, and compiled into an unusual tall figure by the edge of the big pit which was caused by Lily. The tall, muscular figure remained shrouded in a shadow. The details of the figure's face were then blurred. Judging from his stature, that he was a rather strong man. This unknown figure was standing beside the pit within 100 meters, sniffing to distinguish a certain scent that lingered in the air. The man spit and said, "Tisk, such a half-baked, they even used the wrong incense in the ritual." Right after the man stopped speaking, another cloud of dark mist drifted from nowhere, and condensed into a somewhat smaller figure. This man's face was hidden in the shadows. He stooped over to pick up a piece of residual spice and shoved it into his mouth and said, "The formula is right, but it's not meant for the coming-of-age ritual. The younger generations has become rather disappointing. Can you verify which family's descendant is this?" "I don't think anyone cares about family backgrounds these days," the tall man answered and laughed. "You can't pick information up from those old-school folks. The world is getting drastically difficult than ever. It's not easy to survive, not to mention the kid who just became an adult. Whatever family it belongs to, we have to seek upon different ways to get in contact with it. In my opinion, the scenes of the ritual, the arrangement was rather confusing and it didn't follow the actual rules. That one person who conducted the coming-of-age ritual here is probably an orphan. If there was a parent whom is able to guide it from a side, it couldn't have used the wrong incense." The shorter man spitted out the incense dragged from his mouth. He waved his hand just before he proceeded and said, "Begin analyzing the situation first. I'm gonna throw up." The tall man waited for his companion to return, pointing towards the direction of the town and said, "The smell of residual incense here is too heavy, I can roughly judge that they are heading towards that direction. We'll head straight for them and we'll start the search separately tomorrow. Why don't we hunt for them now? They may not have gone far. It is said that 1 or 2 demon hunters have been appearing in this area recently. Without a doubt, they're surely attracted by the half-baked youths. Taking action at night will cause us to be easily targeted by them. Remember, we have to behave like humans, and in this way we are able to live longer. The demon hunter, the shortman, sighed and looked up at the sinking moon. He then turned into a puff of dark mist and dissipated into midair. The demon hunter. Along with a sigh, another puff of dark mist faded away too. They have returned and knew nothing about what has happened in the wilderness. And now they're about to face another tricky problem. Lily was sitting on the sofa in the center of the living room with looks of despair. She wanted to reconfirm with the 3 of them and asked, "Do all of you clearly see that it's a husky?" "You are a veterinarian, and you specialize in dogs," said Hao Ren while pulling out the mobile data terminal from his pocket and continued, "This is the video we took after you've evolved. Watch it and examine it. Our words won't count, you'll have to see for yourself." The mobile data terminal activated a shield to protect itself in case Lily got angry and bit it to pieces, and then it turned on the holographic projection cautiously, showing the footage recorded 2 hours ago. A mighty, domineering, powerful, handsome and lovely husky was galloping in the wilderness where pits were seen everywhere on the ground. She was gambling, rolling, digging, and running around with a stone in her mouth. The husky was exceptionally good with the 4 basic skills. Lily's tears were rolling down her cheeks on the spot. Am I really a husky? Ever since yesterday, Lily had been isolating in her room. She hadn't responded to anyone. Vivian made breakfast ready. In fact, it was more like lunch than a breakfast since Lily only woke up at 10. Realizing Lily wasn't at the table, she glanced at the bedroom door and asked, "Is Doggy okay?" After going through such emotional shock, she needed some time alone, said Hao Ren as he filled up his bowl with rice. "I'll send in her breakfast. I'm afraid that you're the last person she would want to see at the moment. It's just too embarrassing." "Why is that?" Vivian hadn't gotten the message. Hao Ren spread his hands as he said, "The vampire is still a vampire, but the werewolf that she have always been proud of turned out to be a husky. Her self-esteem must have hit rock bottom. She's too embarrassed. Feeling less important. I don't think she would have thought of that deeply in mind." Vivian sat beside Hao Ren as she tossed a ham to Raleigh. "What's more, our relationship isn't as tense as you've imagined. No doubt we have had quarrels, but we aren't sworn enemies. There isn't enough reason for her to not face me. Those are my thoughts. No one knows what goes on within Lily's mind except herself. But considering how sensitive she is as a person, it was kind of hard to tell what was in her mind," Hao Ren thought as he took a long sigh. After being a day of cold-eyed bystander, all of a sudden, Isaacs chimed in. "Although I don't know what the heck husky is, but that little girl's really sad. It's hard to explain what it feels like when a werewolf discovers it isn't a werewolf at all, but a husky." Hao Ren was being honest. But Isaacs was dismissive. "It isn't hard to understand. I knew a demon team leader whom thought to himself that all this while he was the offspring of a fallen angel, but I hadn't had the courage to tell him that his wings was in fact a deformity caused by dystopia." Hao Ren. "I'll send Lily her breakfast." He took the meal, came to her doorstep, and knocked twice. There wasn't any response. "Hey, Lily, it's me." Hao Ren knocked a little harder this time. "I brought you breakfast, could you please open the door? We can talk over it after you have your breakfast." Before his voice trailed off, the door swung open. Lily was standing there, yawning. "Landlord, mealtime isn't it?" "Just woke up," asked Hao Ren. "Yep. We were knocking on your door." "I didn't hear it." Not a slight bit of sadness was written on her sleepy face. He didn't know what to make out of it, as they'd been worried for nothing since last night until this morning. Lily had been sleeping like a log. Hao Ren had wanted to ask but he didn't. Was the dumb husky in such a hurry to show off its natural instinct after knowing her real identity last night? Lily didn't have a clue about the dramatic expression written on Hao Ren's face. She took her breakfast over to the table and started gobbling until she was completely stuffed. Burp. "I'm done." "Have your brains been short-circuited?" Vivian stared at Lily in amazement before patting her head. She said, "Doggy, do you remember what happened last night?" Lily's facial expression changed after hearing that, and that was a good sign. It proved that she hadn't gone insane. Her eyes took a quick sweep of her surroundings before glacing upon Hao Ren. Landlord, am I really a husky? Nothing is as truthful than this. Don't run away from it, Lily. Vivian answered on behalf of Hao Ren. Think about it, wolves and huskies are close relatives, so do werewolves and werhuskies. Think of yourself as a minority within the werewolf race. The only werhusky in the werewolf race. Lily gave out an astonished face while counting her fingers. Why am I the only husky? Who knows, there could be a husky branch in the werewolf race. Vivian tried to comfort her. Look, huskies evolved from wolves, as they came from the same family a few hundred years ago. So a werhusky spin-off from werewolves is entirely possible. Well, that sounds a little out of this world. Hao Ren whispered to Isaacs. But I think she's got a point, said Isaacs as he nodded. Hao Ren. Lily hasn't gotten used to think about such complex situations. She had completely lost the thread. In the end, she shrugged it off and said, forget it, I'm happy with my life, after all it has got nothing to do with food and sleep. Hao Ren looked at Lily in amazement. She's more husky than a husky when it comes to thinking, and as naive as one could ever get. I've got an idea. I know how to verify your identity in the most accurate way. As a vampire, Vivian had been colorblind species-wise. She reached out and held Lily by her hand to offer her help. Appearance can be deceiving while the MDT could have messed things up, but I've got a reliable way to do that. Lily's ears stood up as she listened. How? Allow me to suck your blood. Lily shook off Vivian's hand and hid behind Hao Ren. Batty, mind what you say. I thought I could treat you as a friend. Look how tense you've become. Vivian gave Lily an oblique glance. It's just like getting a blood test done in the hospital. I'd only take a sip for testing purposes. I'm not saying I feast on it. Look, if you decline my offer, you won't find similar services elsewhere, and that will leave you no choice but to visit a vet. Where on earth could you find a vet who would do a werewolf and werhusky verification? Something told Hao Ren that MDT analysis was way better than Vivian's homemade formula. But after pondering for some time, Lily chose to buy upon Vivian's idea. All right, let's make it up front, just one bite, or else I'll bite back. You know my teeth is sharper than yours. A teeth fight between a husky and a vampire, how cute could the maiden get? Vivian was all smiles as she slowly walked up to Lily. Lily's tail straightened as she instinctively curled herself up on the couch. Where are you going to bite? As per our clan's custom, the neck. Of course I'd bite the arm if you're scared. What's there to be afraid of? Here's my neck. Oh, wait a second, have you brushed your teeth yet? The teeth of the esteemed blood clan are sterile. No worries, in fact they're cleaner than a clean room. Rinse your mouth first, at least. Stop the bullsh**. Here you go, close your eyes. Oh. Before Lily could finish her trashy talk, Vivian had sunk her fangs into Lily's neck, and the werewolf girl could only force out a short cry of surprise. Hao Ren stood by his side and watched throughout as the two beautiful lasses were entangled together on the couch, which let out an imagination of the blooming lily scene. What a waste. Anyway, Vivian kept her word as she had only sucked a small amount of blood out of Lily's neck. It took less than a few seconds before Vivian got to her feet. She smacked her mouth appreciating the aftertaste. A strange hot flush appeared on Lily's face as she looked at Vivian quizzically. How's that? Vivian's expression slowly changed from calm to frowning. Lily tensed up when she saw the odd expression on Vivian's face. Please don't scare me, how was it? I think my understanding of the world is still very limited, said Vivian as she quietly distanced herself away from Lily. There are two things, neither which I know is good news nor bad news. First, you're definitely a husky, I swear by the name of Blood Clan. I've never made a mistake when it comes to blood identification. Lily had prepared herself mentally, so she hadn't got a problem with the first news. What about the second? I had also identified a 1/16 Pekingese bloodline. There were several advantages to Lily's husky lineage. It granted her a strong and sturdy nerve with an open-minded attitude. Hao Ren sensed that the maiden had become so open-minded that she wouldn't have minded if someone threatened to exterminate her family. Thanks to this open-minded perspective of hers, Lily didn't pass out when Vivian broke the news of her 1/16th Pekingese bloodline. But it was Hao Ren who had collapsed and fallen to the floor. Hao Ren's reaction had been more intense. When he got up from the floor, he scurried over and asked Vivian, "What did you just say? What does this Pekingese bloodline mean?" Vivian had been calmer all this while. After all, she had been through a lot in life. Even a husky could become a werewolf. What's there to be surprised about the Pekingese bloodline? Who knows, besides the husky breed, there's a Pekingese subbreed within the werewolf race. "What has gotten into werewolves in today's world?" asked Hao Ren. "Get over it. It isn't just you, I'm equally surprised." Vivian gave a pat on Hao Ren's shoulder. "Frankly, I've never seen a werewolf like her in me entire life, but the truth has written on your face, other than that we could only guess. I think Lily isn't a werewolf after all," clearing his trashy thoughts. Hao Ren began to speak with a clear state of mind. "Husky is of enough B*LLSH*T. Now what? Pekingese? I wouldn't buy that subbreed crap." Lily curiously glanced at Hao Ren and then Vivian. "Then who am I?" Hao Ren held Lily's hand tightly and said, "You're a real husky. Let's not talk about this anymore, shall we?" "Okay." Lily thought about it, but she couldn't come up with an explanation to this unexpected situation. The take the easy way out got the best of her. She nodded as if she had accepted her fate. "Then, what should I do from now on?" "Just live however you like," said Vivian. "You've been living your life as you've always been, with or without husky bloodlines. Moreover, at our current stage where the other beings are on the sideline, even the aristocrats of the blood clan are near extinction. Given at such circumstances, would anyone still talk about bloodlines? It's not that a pure bloodline could feed your stomach though. Living in peace is the best thing anyone could do for now." Vivian had always been looking on the bright side of things. As a pauper herself, her ultimate life goal was to have a warm meal a day, and she was contented with it. Such perception on life was what Lily needed right now. Nothing had worried the werewolf maiden like this time around. May the force of the husky bloodline be with her. While Lily was sitting on the couch, while engrossing herself thinking about life, Hao Ren took the opportunity to chave a chat with Vivian. "How did you figure out the 1/16th Pekingese bloodline? Granted, vampire has the talent, you would still have to understand what Pekingese bloodline is all about in the first place." Vivian gave a slight smile. "I had tasted Pekingese's blood before. I've no problem identifying the different hereditary characteristics of felines and canines." Hao Ren was stunned. "You drank the blood of dogs and cats. Why?" "Because of poverty." Hao Ren. It was hard to imagine how many times Vivian was left to starve in the past. The only reason she could still survive to this day was because of the rich biodiversity on Earth. "Let's talk about something more pleasant, doggy," said Vivian. She quickly steered the topic away as she felt that her humble past wasn't something to be proud of. "Do you feel any changes? Besides atavism, have you gained any new abilities after the evolution?" Hearing that, Lily was overjoyed and wagged her tail. "Tada, look at his." The werewolf maiden raised her hands up in the air, mimicking a claw posture. And this astounding thing happened. A strange glow of light wreathed upon her hands. It slowly transformed into something substantial. In one hand, the glow was cold and icy blue, while in the other it was hot and blazing red. The glows slowly extended out from each of her hands and stopped when it reached half a meter long, where they began to gradually condense into a solid state and formed into claws which looked like a weapon. The claw on the left was cold and icy blue, while the right one was so hot that people could feel it from as far as 2 meters away. Apart from the contrasting colors, both claws were identical in shapes and sizes. It looked similarly to a customized weapon in the shape of wolf claws. "This is it," said Lily happily. "I had dreamed about myself getting these claws last night, didn't expect it was true. Isn't it beautiful?" "Vivian. What's wrong?" Hao Ren noticed that the vampire maiden had fallen into an unusual silence. "It's beyond comprehension." Vivian's facial expression seemed bizarre from what she saw. It was beyond description. She looked at Lily as though she was a monster. "These claws are all you've got after all the troubles of evolving? They don't seem to be the result of your transformation last night. I thought you would have gained some special abilities, like what every other werewolf did when they become an adult." But you have gotten only 2 claws. I don't know. Poking her face with her claw, Lily was somewhat worried. Werewolves get a pair of new claws too as they grow up, don't they? If not, does it mean my evolution process has gone wrong? Hao Ren quickly chimed in. There's nothing wrong with you. You're a husky. It's not fair to compare with them. Lily. Let it be. Vivian waved as if she gave up. Even a husky could be this epic, there's nothing that couldn't be done. For now, 2 things are assured. 1, you could either transform into a giant fighter husky just by eating a truckload of spicy strip, or 2, you could reinforce your claws as a werewolf. Right. Lily nodded proudly in agreement. Yes, awesome. Now Vivian felt that she couldn't possibly involve Doggy in the normal sense, so she danced to her tune instead as she waved to Lily. Okay, let me take a look at your claws, I might find out whether there are traces of science or magic in there. Okay. Lily nodded happily as she took down the claws. Have a look, but be careful. The red one is hot. Although I didn't feel a thing, you might get hurt. After a night of hoo-ha, it seemed that Lily and Vivian were finally starting to compromise and show acts of concern for each other. This wasn't the focus of the story, however. It was the moment when Lily detached her claws, the whole house turned eerily quiet. This thing is detachable. Vivian's eyes nearly popped out of her head. You could remove them. Hao Ren was speechless. He had again found himself light years away before his worldview could be rebuilt. It might take a lifetime if he kept hanging around with his strange tenants. Of course it's detachable. Lily nodded as a matter of fact. They don't grow on my arm, they're handheld. How the heck is that possible at all? I've never seen such things in my life. Vivian's mouth somewhat cringed to a side. She mumbled as she reached out for the strange husky claws. However, the moment her hands touched the claws, her hands immediately backed off as if she got an electric shock. Whoa, it's hot. The claws itself weren't harmful to Lily. The discharge of coldness and heat weren't an illusion. Both of them, especially the red-hot claw, weren't something one, not even Vivian, could handle. Vivian pulled her hands back while Lily loosened her grips of the divine weapon. Hao Ren called out in panic, my. One of the claws fell onto the table, a thin layer of frost instantly formed and covered the entire surface. The other claw fell directly and got stuck within the table too, but it burned a hole through the table as if it was sticking a red-hot knife into a butter. Table, at last, Hao Ren shouted out the remaining words. If Hao Ren's memory was accurate, this was the 3rd time that Lily and Vivian's scuffle had ended up with broken furniture. It has been fine and dandy that Lily was paying her rent promptly and Vivian being a rather decent cook, nevertheless Hao Ren would go broke at this rate buying new furniture to replace. Retracting her claws, Lily folded herself into a ball of fur awkwardly on the sofa. Vivian let out a deep sigh, you'll be paying for this. I don't have the money. Lily's response was surprisingly fast, so much for the pride of a vampire. Vivian shrugged her off, oh, I do have my pride as a vampire, just that I'm broke. Hao Ren looked forlornly at the broken table that he had just bought 2 days ago. Upon hearing Vivian's nonchalant declaration of no money, he too let out a sigh. Forget about it. I'll send a report to Raven 12345. If we are lucky, we might be able to make a claim. The two instantly lit up with a cheer. Vivian had given up asking Lily about her claws and went about doing her house chores. Lily on the other hand was fiddling with her new army knife. A few ordinary days had passed after that. Lily had recovered almost too fast from the devastating revelation of being a werehusky. She didn't seem too disturbed by the fact, and by day 2, Lily was out and about looking for something to munch on. That itself gave Hao Ren a considerable measure of relief, that cheerful yet ve of an idiot is back to herself. After that experience, Hao Ren and the others concluded that Lily was not the kind of person that you'll need to fret about. Just look at how well she is able to weather a revelation that would normally dampen someone out. So what's there to worry about? Blessed be the fool, for she knows no sorrow. Having to worry so much about a husky just made Hao Ren laugh. With him confirming that Lily was in a good condition, everyone in the house returned to their normal routines. Hao Ren was mucking about as per normal, and was now in charge of grocery shopping. Isaacs was busy studying the various cultures of the Earthlings, hopefully being able to assimilate into crowds. With that face of his though, tough luck, Lily had a rather regimented routine. She was busy writing on odd days, and out playing veterinarian on even days. Vivian, aside from being in charge of the household chores, was currently guiding Lily on how to control and mold her new profound powers. Nevertheless, figuring out a way to prevent clothes from being ripped off during her transformation. Hao Ren's view on the routine was, let live and let be, as long as they don't tear the house down. Thus came the third day of Lily's post-transformation. Hao Ren was out shopping. The weather was getting colder by the day, with overcast and rain forecasted. General temperature of the area are also falling fast. Hao Ren realized that he needed to stock up on necessities. This time around, he left his axe at home, even though the demon was eager to help. Hao Ren thought that it would be better to let the people around his place to familiarize with that horrifying face of his axe before taking him out again to town. Chances are people would mistake that giant of a man for a fugitive and Hao Ren as his hostage. As he was about to cross a road, Hao Ren saw another huge hunk of a foreigner's walking towards him. Standing at a pleasant 190 centimeters tall, the man was muscular. He donned a long windbreaker with curly locks. Hao Ren couldn't tell exactly which country he was from. Granted, a country bumpkin like Hao Ren barely knew any foreigners, with English as an exception, but the ash-blue eyes left an impression on Hao Ren. As he walked towards the man, Hao Ren took a few glimpses. A foreigner in the southern suburbs is almost as rare as a wild panda. Hao Ren even doubted that the town had any foreign visitors previously. Well, he was one of the rare whom had non-human guests at home, which had made acquaintances with aliens, therefore he did not pay too much attention. He gotten on his foot as soon as he caught a few good glances of the man. As he was about to step away, the man spoke. Please hold on. With a rather off pronunciation, it can be clearly identified as Mandarin. Oh. Do you need directions? Hao Ren curiously looked at the foreigner who could speak Mandarin. I'm Kassar Eben. The stranger introduced himself in a friendly manner as he held his hand out for a handshake. I'm a small-time businessman in town for a work trade. Can you direct me to the registration office for foreigners report themselves? Hao Ren shook the proffered hand, muttering to himself based on the size of the man's palm. He thought for a while, you might want to go to the local police station. Walk to the end of the street and turn left, you'll find the place towards the ending of the street. But I'm not sure if they are able to help you with that, might need to visit the city for it. Oh, got it. Thanks, buddy. Kassar smiled, but he held Hao Ren's hand tight. Hao Ren noticed that he was sniffing from time to time, perhaps out of habit, but he felt like the man was trying to get a whiff of his scent. Sensing a chill going down his spine, Hao Ren shook his hand free. You're welcome. Ha ha ha. Kassar nodded with a smile and walked towards the opposite direction. As he walked past Hao Ren, took a deep breath, and left a rather ominous, good luck. Hao Ren held his breath until the man was out of sight before releasing a loud sigh. He felt goosebumps were all over him. His rather good mood had been utterly ruined by the thought that he could have ran into a homosexual. The encounter in the morning had Hao Ren in twists. He quickly completed his shopping and headed home. As he stepped into the house compound, he saw Lily and Vivian practicing Lily's new ability. The table had mounds of raw lamb meat and Lily was using her ice claws to freeze the meat and shatter it into small tiny bits. She then used her flame claw to roast the meat, with Vivian doing the seasoning by the side. It was obvious that Lily had trouble controlling her newfound abilities, and there were plentiful chunks of charred, or frozen solid meat scattered about. Vivian, however, was enthusiastically cheering her on. You can do it. Once you have gotten used to this, you'll be quicker than those stalls selling lamb skewers downtown. When the time comes, I'll set up a stall to sell these yummy treats while you grill them at home. I'll be rich in no time. Oh. You're back, Mr. Landlord. Can't you two do something more worthy of your kind? Hao Ren stepped up and stroked Lily's head. Lily is one thing, but surely you have your vampiric pride to think of no. Lily didn't dodge off when Hao Ren started stroking her head. For once, she actually stood sides with Vivian. I think Batty's idea is pretty neat. She is annoying, but she's smart too. Say, why had you been constantly stroking my head for the past 2 days? Hao Ren quickly lifted his hand. After hiding out Lily's real identity, he couldn't help himself with the odd habits he's picking up. Sigh, what an awful day. Hao Ren felt that there was something fishy behind Vivian's gaze and quickly changed the topic. I ran into bear-like foreigner who seemed to be a gay. Lily's ears perked up as she heard that. "Oh, Mr. Landlord, is it a start of a new life for you?" Hao Ren shuddered as he caught Lily's gaze. It was full of ominous anticipation. He decided it was best to put a full stop to this and said, "What's with that look?" "I'm straight as a ruler." Lily sighed deeply. "Man. I thought I had new writing materials just right beside me." Thank goodness that Vivian did not follow Lily's lead in straying the conversation into an uncomfortable topic. She curiously said, "Let's hear about it. It's very rare to see a foreigner here." "Oh, it is." Hao Ren recounted the incident earlier that morning. He too felt something was off. That guy spoke in a rather decent Mandarin. He should have been living here for some time then. It's a surprise that he doesn't know where to register himself. "Kassar Eben, you say?" Vivian took interest in the name as she frowned. She quickly shook her head. "Maybe it's just a coincidence." Hao Ren looked at Vivian curiously. "You know of that name?" "I do know of an Eben family." Vivian shrugged. "But the last I heard of them was about 100-odd years back. They were a bunch of werewolves scheming to revive the fortunes of their kind. Not a pleasant bunch, I must say, but their area of operation was in Europe and the Americas. You won't be able to find that many werewolves in Asia. They won't be bothering us." While Vivian seemed to be unconcerned about it, Hao Ren quickly felt something unpleasant coming his way. This was common for him ever since he met Raven 12345. Vivian's get-rich-quick scheme of selling lamb skewers with Lily fell apart the next day. It was not due to the improbability of the plan but due to Lily and her gluttonous appetite. The idiot literally gobbled up anything meaty in front of her, including those that were burnt. This habit was beyond correction and Vivian figured that she could no longer do business, at least in the F&B sector, with the Whirlhusky. Speaking of Lily, the dumb Whirlhusky was rather pleased with her newfound abilities. While no one could clearly explain how she came to obtain her pair of detachable elemental claws, Lily herself did not pay too much attention to that part. She only knew that the claws of unknown properties were very nifty to have and busily practiced every day. With that said though, to onlookers, it looked more like she was just jumping around and slashing at air. Hao Ren could understand why Lily was so excited. The idiot previously had nothing but brute strength, quite literally all brawn and no brains. According to Vivian, most werewolves would have developed a skill or two, such as poisoncraft or shadow stalking and the likes, some sort of minor magic. Lily had no inkling or skill in that discipline. As she did not encounter any other supernaturals previously, she did not feel like she lost out on anything. However, after being told about her race by Vivian, it was natural that she felt incomplete, compounded with the revelation that came with her evolution. At the very least, she managed to obtain some form of special ability now. Who could blame her for being giddy about it? The next morning, Hao Ren was out to town, going about his routine. He bought some pork ribs and spicy sticks, which Lily loved. He also got some new kitchenware and fresh vegetables for Vivian. He felt more and more like a babysitter for the two supernatural ladies instead of a normal landlord. But he was not complaining. All the expenses incurred by the two could be claimed from Raven 12345. His main duty was to keep his tenants happy. A job that did not need him to crack his head all too often was very appealing. When he got home, he noticed his axe was missing. Where did he go? The great demon was usually glued to the television at this hour, studying about the norms of humanity. It seemed so routine that his absence was the first thing that caught Hao Ren's attention when he got home. "The big one went out," Vivian said as she vacuumed the hall. Said something about looking for things to do and that he was bored to death at home. Hao Ren was just about to nod when something clicked. Wait, what? He went out. Why didn't you stop him?" "Why would I?" Vivian raised an eyebrow at Hao Ren. "It's not like this place is a prison." Hao Ren found himself tongue-tied and was hard-pressed to describe the commotion one like his axe could bring. Furthermore, Vivian was right. This was not a prison and its tenants were free to go out. He should not be restricting Isaac's movements just because of his looks. Frankly speaking, Isaac had already done a good job changing from a 5-meter-tall, great demon into a 2-meter-tall man. While his facial features left much to be desired, you could not fault the men for not trying. Hao Ren finally relented and shrugged. "I just hope he doesn't run into trouble with the police." If I'm around, at the very least I can try to talk him out of trouble. Oh right, did he say when he would be coming back? At that same instant, Lily came out of her room, lugging a small box. Having overheard the conversation, she quipped, he said he wanted to see the city center. He was sleeping in an alternate dimension when he was in England, so he didn't manage to see anything. He'll be back by noon at the earliest, evening the latest. He also said he wanted to try eating outside, to get used to human society. Hao Ren felt something was off and asked, does he have any money? Lily nodded, yep, I lent him $200. That gave Hao Ren some measure of relief, but he really hoped that his axe did not get himself into trouble, or else he would probably have to bail him out from the lockup. For someone who could cause a ruckus akin to a robbery at the supermarket, imagine the attention he would attract, walking down the streets. Plus, he opted to go to the city center for his first visit. Heh. You're going out as well? Hao Ren only then realized that Lily was lugging a box and dressed to go out. So, he decided to ask. Lily nodded. Yep, made an appointment with Green Bean. Gonna meet him later at 9:30 for a checkup. Hao Ren looked confused for a while before he realized that Green Bean was a stray dog that lived nearby. Most of the strays in the area did not have names, but, after Lily, the kind veterinarian, arrived, all of them had names now. Green Bean was a pastoral hound with an issue with its hind legs. The name came about as Lily saw it biting on a green bean popsicle. It was regularly in Lily's care. Every time Lily mentioned about the strays in the southern suburbs, Hao Ren needed some time to process the information. In the idiot's eyes, there was no differences between men and dogs. Hence, every time she talked about her patients, she sounded like she was talking about a person. The other time when Lily was having dinner with Hao Ren, she told him King Lionheart, that lived nearby, mentioned him frequently. Hao Ren was stunned for a good few moments until it dawned on him that King Lionheart was the Chow Chow from the Zhang family living behind. He almost thought that he was actually related to someone from the House of Plantagenet in Europe. Vivian set the vacuum cleaner down and pointed towards the pork ribs on the table. Coming back by noon. Lily swallowed her saliva and nodded excitedly. Yes. Batty, don't you go eating my ribs. Why would I eat dog food in the first place? Vivian said as she left for the kitchen. If you're coming back by noon, then I'll be putting the meat to stew. It should be ready by noon. Hao Ren was pleasantly surprised by the cordial conversation the two were having and quipped, you two sure are getting along well. As expected, the two ladies screeched in unison. Who's getting along with that doggy/Batty? Hao Ren laughed out loud and after some coaxing, managed to get Lily out of the house for her appointment with Green Bean. After that, he lay on the sofa and turned on the MDT, checking if Raven 12345 had replied to his report. He had completed the report the day after Lily completed her transformation. The report was rather literal in its description of a werewolf transforming into a husky. While Raven 12345 was unpredictable at the best of times, he expected her to have some sort of reaction to the report. He was grossly mistaken on that account, as the report was just marked as read without any further comments. He then tried to contact Raven 12345 but was greeted by an automated message that sounded divine at first but was quite literally *T, the celestial that you are looking for is not at home. Please leave a message after the beep. For believers who require immediate assistance, please use the self-help prayer system. For military personnel requiring immediate assistance, please use the self-help reinforcement terminal. For inspectors requiring immediate assistance, please contact the closest combat group for assistance. If Hao Ren requires immediate assistance, please use your inner strength and faith to deal with it. Hao Ren was dumbstruck. I have a suggestion, the MDT suddenly spoke. You can take a knife to Madame 12345's office and challenge her magical servant to a duel. Then you destroy everything from the office to the information vault and then everything from the information vault to the generator room. After that, leave a message on the local channel calling her a lunatic. And that will let her see my ability and worth. No, at least your death would be much more spectacular with your name appearing on the local channel's headlines. Hao Ren demurred for a moment and passed the MDT to Vivian. Put it in a pot and boil it for half an hour. Don't hold back on the parsley and coriander. I dare you to do it. Just you see, I'll drill a hole in your pot. The whole morning was a scene of Hao Ren and the MDT going back and forth. It was soon noon, but there was no sight of Lily coming home. Hao Ren and Vivian waited for Lily until 12 o'clock in the afternoon, but she still did not return. Lily had a strong sense of time, at least, when it came to mealtime. As a husky, she would not give anyone the opportunity to rob her of food. So usually, she would have reached home an hour before lunchtime. This should have been the case, especially on that day. She told them earlier that she would reach home before noon. Therefore, this left Hao Ren puzzled. She's late for lunch for the first time. Vivian put the dishes on the table, looked at the gate oddly and said, "Has something happened? I'll give her a call." Hao Ren took his cell phone out and dialed Lily's number. After a long while, he shook his head and said, "No one's answering the phone." Vivian and Hao Ren looked at each other for a while. Finally, Vivian spoke first. "Does she have any other friends or places to go here?" "No. Like you, she came here alone and she's not really familiar with this place." Hao Ren stood up slowly. He was getting more and more worried about Lily. He then said, "And usually she won't hide anything from us. If anything happens, she would call back to inform us at once. Is she in trouble now? What could have happened to her?" "Her combat power isn't just for display," said Vivian. "You worry too much." "You're right. She's a werewolf after all, at least she's a powerful dog." Although Hao Ren said so, the feeling of uneasiness still lingered inside him and he did not know why he felt this way. Lily had only been out for a few hours and they just could not reach her for the time being. It should not have tensed him up. However, deep inside, Hao Ren's sixth sense was telling him something was not right. His highly accurate sixth sense stirred inside him again. He was a little irritable but unsure of what to do. "I'll release a few bats out and search the streets nearby." Watching Hao Ren feeling all fidgety, Vivian stood up, conjured a few black bats and said, "I kinda know the places she usually goes. If the bats can't find her, we will go out and look for her." When Hao Ren was just about to nod, the phone sitting on the sofa's armrest suddenly rang. He quickly picked the phone up and found that the phone screen showed Lily's face, a white husky. Hao Ren changed Lily's picture for no reason the night before. The picture was a screenshot from the video of Lily's evolution 2 days ago. "Hello, Lily." Hao Ren waved to Vivian, signaling that Lily called. "Where are you? Why didn't you come back?" Landlord, I met 2 psychos." Lily lowered her voice and spoke in a hushed tone, 2 foreigners. "They said they're my parents and want to take me home. I don't know where I am now." Hao Ren was on alert at once and looked serious. Vivian also immediately leaned in and asked, "What's going on?" Hao Ren signaled her not to speak and hurriedly asked, "Where are you now? What do the 2 foreigners look like? What did they tell you? Are you safe now? I don't know where this place is." Lily's voice sounded as usual. It appeared that she was not hurt but confused about what had happened to her. "They're so secretive. I can't understand what they're talking about. By the way, one of them is very tall, about 1.9 meters in height, strong like a bear, and the other man is about the same size as you, with a hooked nose and a sickly look." Hao Ren was confused by Lily and could not understand what she was talking about. He could only tell that Lily had been abducted. He suddenly got a little exasperated and spluttered, "Why are you so dumb? So easily abducted by strangers? I didn't want to go with them." Lily sounded very angry. "I was taken away by some black smoke. The big guy knew magic and brought me over with using dark fog. I found myself in a room after the black smoke dispersed. Usually I would have beaten off guys like these, but these 2 men seemed pretty strong. I didn't know if I could beat them, so I dared not fight with them. Landlord, come and rescue me. Vivian and I will go out now. Try to tell me what you see so I'll know where you are. Also, what about the foreigners who kidnapped you? Will they find out that you're calling me? They went out to buy me some food, but one of them did not go far. I can still smell him. However, he's quite a distance from here and there's a wall between us, so he can't hear me." Lily dropped her voice to a whisper and Hao Ren could barely hear her. It seemed that THD Husky was not so dumb after all. "I'm in a shabby room. The walls are grimy with peeling paint. It looks like an abandoned house. The big man sealed the door and windows with dark fog so I can't go out or see the situation outside. But, just now, when they opened the door, I took a quick glance. It looks like a warehouse outside. Hao Ren paused for a moment. What could he find out from such little information? There were lots of abandoned warehouses in the entire city, and there were more than hundreds of possible warehouses. Look around the room to see if there's any sign. Hao Ren found that he could not find any valuable information from the clues provided by Lily and quickly thought of other ways. If the warehouse was in use, people might have left signs or waste there. Go and look for any of them. Sign, a rustling sound came from the phone. Although it's shabby here, it seems that the two crazy men have cleaned this place. So, it's clean and there's nothing much in the room. Ah, I found it. Here's a scrap metal board. The words on it are so blurred, I can only read the words Hao Yun. Is that useful? Hao Yun. Hao Ren immediately searched the words in his head desperately, trying to recall any old warehouses which were related to Hao Yun in the city. Suddenly, he heard the faint crash of an iron door coming from the phone. It sounded like the gate of the warehouse was pushed open. They've come back. I'll hang up first, said Lily. Be careful. Hao Ren spoke quickly before Lily hung up, try not to fight with them. They know magic. Lily quickly replied and hung up. How is she? Vivian leaned in and asked. Although the both of them had conflicts on a daily basis, she was also quite worried of Lily at that moment. That stupid girl's been kidnapped. It sounds like a kidnapping. Hao Ren had calmed down, but he could not suppress the worries in his heart. She's so powerful, yet she still got kidnapped. The world is really dangerous. Hao Ren then roughly explained to Vivian what had just happened. When Hao Ren finished talking, Vivian breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Don't worry, the doggy will be fine." Hao Ren gave Vivian a strange look and Vivian reminded him. Still remember that Kasar Eben guy you met? Hao Ren immediately felt the goosebumps on his back. That muscular gay. Why is it that you only remember the word, gay? Vivian stared at Hao Ren. If I'm right, Lily was taken away by Kasar Eben. She's been discovered by her own kin. The same species. Hao Ren reacted at once and asked, you mean that gay dude's a werewolf? It's the Eben family. If I'm not mistaken, it should be them. Vivian sighed and looked upset. TSK, I really shouldn't be so careless. It seems that being too comfortable for more than 100 years has made me become less vigilant. I should have thought of them when I heard the word Eben. Hao Ren blinked and asked, since they're also werewolves, what did they kidnap Lily for? What else could they have done? They'll bring her back, of course. Vivian shrugged. The Eben family is one of the few heterogeneous families that's still fantasizing about reviving the mythological era and the only native clan who heeds the concept of clans. They have been searching for lost compatriots all over the world. At the very beginning, they just gathered their family members or their kin. But then, in the recent 200 years they have enlarged their scope to the entire werewolf population. As long as they're werewolves, they'll be courted. Lily, unless they see it with their own eyes, who would think that she's actually a husky? Hao Ren was speechless. Apparently the two hapless werewolves, who kidnapped Lily, had been fooled. If what Vivian said was true, Lily should not have been in any danger. Of course, it was unlikely that she had any personal freedom. In fact, the werewolf was a solitary creature. Most werewolves would leave the pack once they were grown up. This was the reason why werewolves were the fastest and most scattered foreign race post-mythological era. As for the Eben family, they were an exception. This was a werewolf pack with family concept in mind. They still maintained a close relationship within their pack long after the mythological era and amid the dominance of the human race as well as demon hunters. They were the sole remaining werewolf pack in the present days. No one knew the leadership hierarchy of the Eben family. Vivian only had a sketchy understanding of them based on their activities in the outside world, where they were constantly trying to regroup their scattered pack members. Europe and Latin America were their customary hideouts where they still remained up till 100 years ago. They are a bunch of weird fellows. They're slightly brainier than ordinary werewolves, but that's it. While Vivian gave an introduction on the Eben family, she was also generous with her own comments. Although they understood the importance of unity, they were equally naive to believe that they could single-handedly bring the world back to the mythological era. TSK, TSK. Even Fenrir, the monstrous wolf's been turned into stew by demon hunters, yet they still don't show restraint. What's going to happen to Lily? That was Hao Ren's chief concern at the moment. She'll be forced to join them. Vivian pouted as she said, "That's the level of a werewolf's intelligence. They lack tact, even their own family members are frequently strong-armed. I'm afraid that the Eben family is trying to rope in all the scattered werewolves out there. Since they have the numbers, they would definitely strong-arm their way into getting submission. Doggy, however, will be safe for now as they still treat her as their own. But things may go awry once they find that she's non-compliant. With her childlike tendencies, I reckon she'll have the daylights beaten out of her." Hao Ren was breaking out in cold sweat like a Coke bottle at an August barbecue. He immediately sunk his head into the city map, searching for any lead. It did not matter how little it was. Experience taught Vivian that the werewolves used their house specialty, dark fog, as a means of cover in order to kidnap Lily. They would not have ran far with this type of fog. Lily was likely still in the city area. That was going to be the focus of the search. Hao Ren switched the MDT on, projected the map of the city and started searching by the keyword Hao Yun. More than 100 potential targets were found, of which more than 10 were warehouses, factories, and large facilities. What a common name it was. But fortunately, Lily was not held in Guangming XX factory. That name was simply as common as dirt. Don't you have the capability of tracking cell phones? As Hao Ren analyzed each and every possible target, he knocked on the MDT's case. You should have traced the signal when Lily called in just now. The MDT protested, the device was on sleep mode. You didn't think of what to do then and now you're blaming others. The device is just a tool, you are the user. You should have switched the alarm on yourself instead of blaming the device. Hao Ren was speechless and subsequently continued his work. He had thought of sending an SOS to Raven 12345. This was an emergency after all. However, the thought just flashed through his mind for a second before he binned it. He was Lily's guardian, he was responsible for her safety. Sending out an SOS would only mean he was inept, unable to sort things out by himself, and that was an embarrassment too much to bear. In the city and the districts around it, targets with the name Hao Yun are plenty: an electrical appliance factory, 2 transportation companies, 2 warehouses, and 6 or 7 unlikely targets. The place Lily described sounds more like an abandoned warehouse, a warehouse built in a factory, or simply an empty warehouse. The electrical appliance factory is still in business, which means it isn't an abandoned building. That can be ruled out together with another transportation company. So, that leaves us 3 targets to investigate. The 3 targets, all were abandoned years ago and would not appear in online search results. Fortunately, the MDT managed to pull up information about their whereabouts from the dark web. Their 3 locations fit the abandoned, old warehouse description nicely, but further information was not possible to obtain. Let's check them out. Vivian took a gander at the map and discovered that the 3 places were far from each other. One was located in the old section of the city, the other one stood somewhere in the northern suburbs, while the last one was hidden in a small town dozens of kilometers away. Each of them was a typical, abandoned child of development which no one cared for or remembered. This fits a movie plot nicely. Tucking people away in such places would guarantee no one could ever find them. That's a lot of distance to cover. Hao Ren stared sullenly at the map. I should have bought a car. I'm working for God, but I'm not given a company car. I'll send my bats. Vivian waved as she called out 3 little bats. Then she gazed out from the window and saw the scorching sun. She did not look particularly pleased. Geez, the weather forecast is crap. I'm afraid the little bats will be baked half dead before they reach their destinations. That dolt's going to owe me one. The bats hovered around Vivian before they flew towards and out of the window heroically, ready to embrace the bright sunshine. A thought suddenly hit Hao Ren. Wait a minute, I've got an idea. He darted into Lily's room and seconds later, he came out with a bottle of sunscreen in hand. That girl bought this a couple of days ago out of impulse. She's never used it. So, I guess it would be useful. Hao Ren happily opened the bottle up and waved to Vivian's tiny bats, signaling them to land and rest on the table. The vampire maiden looked on with her jaw dropped to the floor. You're so resourceful. Ah, that's so cooling. The bats and Vivian shared their bodily senses. As Hao Ren rubbed the sunscreen on the bats, Vivian felt it instantly and gave out a slight moan. Hao Ren picked up on her reaction, his hand jolted and he almost dropped the bottle. Mind your reaction, please. I've never used such an expensive thing in all my life, Vivian spoke with a protesting face. How ironic, first time using sunscreen not on myself but the bats. Don't apply too much, it will weigh them down. Everything was up and running after a moment. The 3 tiny bats flitted out the windows like arrows toward 3 different directions. Their speed exceeded that of normal bats. Even the slowest one flew no less than 90 kilometers per hour based on visual estimates. Staring at the 3 fast disappearing, black dots, he could not help but say, well, I think I'm a little overimaginative. Vivian did not say a word as she was immersed into the shared senses of her bats. Her entire attention was focused on the visual and radar signals received by the bats. A 3-dimensional visual of the city started to form in her mind. Before long, the first bat arrived at its destination. It was the abandoned warehouse in the city, left behind by a transportation company. Inside and outside the warehouse, there was not a single movement. The first target was ruled out. The remaining 2 bats continued their journeys to the satellite town dozens of kilometers away and the northern suburbs respectively. Vivian suddenly screamed in surprise. Hao Ren quickly pulled up and asked, "Got it?" 1 bat's down. Vivian was clueless about what had happened. Before I realized anything, one of the bat went silent. The one that was en route to the north disappeared right above the city. Could it be the werewolves? I don't think so. Werewolves can't fly. They couldn't have possibly gotten to my bat, Vivian frowned as she spoke. It may have hit a transformer or something and got electrocuted. Such accidents may happen during high-speed flight. All these man-made structures are a real nuisance. I've collided into them many times myself. Any more sunscreen? I'll dispatch another one. Hao Ren passed the sunscreen. Do it yourself. You looked weird when I was rubbing the sunscreen on the bat earlier. Vivian looked at him angrily before lowering her head and rubbing the bat with sunscreen. Soon after, the 4th recon bat departed. Got it, the northern suburbs. Finally, Vivian got a lead. Doggie's trace has been found. Finding Lily's whereabouts was not as difficult as imagined. Perhaps you could say that the kidnappers did not count on a highborn vampire to go all out to save a werehusky. They stowed her in an abandoned warehouse somewhere in the northern suburbs, but they could not contain the aura of a weirus, an idiot. Perhaps it was beyond Cassar Eben's ability to even do that. Vivian did mention that werewolves were rarely competent in high-level magic, and based on their nature, the study of force field enchantments were far in the back of their heads. The dark fog used by the Ebens were considered the pinnacle of werewolf sorcery. They knew how to use it to hide themselves in darkness, but they had little inkling on how to do same on others. However, another problem lay before Hao Ren. The northern suburbs was a considerable distance away. He would need to cross a good part of the city and then the suburban area to reach there. This was not helped by both areas being on the opposite end of each other. Vivian could technically fly there without much of a fuss, but for Hao Ren to get there via normal means would mean that he could be arriving too late. Not to mention that Lily, the idiot, may have already started a fight herself by then. I can fly with you in tow, Vivian said as she stretched her arms to prepare for flight with Hao Ren hanging onto her. I can hide our trace using magic. Normal people won't be able to sense us. But the high-speed flying part may be a bit taxing on you. Hao Ren sighed. What other options do we have? If Lily starts fighting, it'll be too late to even do anything. Vivian hunched as a pair of wings spread out from her back. She held her hand out to Hao Ren. Let's get moving then. Wait a sec, I'll leave Isaac a note. Hao Ren held his hand up and ran back into the house to scribble a note for the great demon, explaining the situation with Lily. It was then that he realized that he left out a lot of details, like Lily only having a mobile phone to keep in touch with, him not having any means to locate his tenant immediately, or having any proper means of transportation. As you can see, a myriad of issues came forth at the very last moment, but there was no time to fret over them now. Hao Ren resolved to meet Raven 12345 on the matter once things were settled. After leaving his note, Hao Ren and Vivian started making their way to the northern suburbs hastily. Flying up in the sky at high speeds, with cold winds buffeting him, the flight was a miserable one for Hao Ren. Even though he was in the embrace of a beautiful vampire, other things were a lot less desirable. Warm embraces are not a specialty of the vampires. He just felt weird being carried by a girl and said, I need to get some new abilities from Raven 1 2 3 4 5 soon. At least, the ability to fly makes things easier. Most people would have simply passed out, being dragged through the air at high altitudes and speed, but Hao Ren with his enhanced vitality could still hold on. Nonetheless, as the winds and condensed moisture hit him in the face, Hao Ren could not help but yelp. And the aftertaste of that scream was rather unpleasant. Vivian could tell that Hao Ren was slightly embarrassed by his tone. She smiled gently and said, It's fine carrying you around. I haven't had many chances to do this, being alone all these years. Having someone to carry about while flying is a refreshing experience. Hao Ren had to respond to that. He found the way Vivian put it was a little bit odd, but he left it at that. At the speed Vivian was moving, it did not take long for them to cross the entire city and come towards a part of a town that looked similar to the southern suburbs. It was the northern suburbs, a mainly industrial zone of the city. It used to be bustling with factories, warehouses, and logistical companies. As the industry would have generated much pollution, it was built far away from the residential areas. With recent redevelopment of a few areas near the city, most of the original tenants had moved on to greener pastures and the northern suburbs industrial area fell into a decline. Only a few factories remained, either too polluting to be near the city area or too costly to move. Most of the buildings were now abandoned. Hao Ren heard that the city hall had plans to redevelop the area, but that would take a few years at least, for it to even take off. The northern suburbs industrial zone was now a mostly deserted shell of its former self. Hao Ren and Vivian landed on the roof of a metal factory and the vampire removed the rather taxing invisibility spell. She pointed towards a big building. That way, my bat is currently hanging on the rooftop. Doggy's aura is coming from that area. Dark fog is surrounding the immediate area and my bat can't get in. Those ebons, puffed, still a nuisance like last time. Hao Ren took a peek and commented, things still seem to be quiet. You got a plan? Vivian looked at Hao Ren. Wanna rush in head first or what? Hao Ren looked rather troubled. He did think about facing the kidnappers head on, but things did not seem so easy. The two werewolves, strictly speaking, did not actually kidnap Lil, but Hao Ren had no idea what concerns they had, which prevented them from telling Lily that they were looking for their kin. At least from how they acted, they had no intentions of harming her. However, Hao Ren was also under no illusion that he could talk his way out of things. Lily was an oddball amongst werewolves, and if the stories about them were true, most werewolves would be hostile. To show his face would mean inviting a fight. He recalled the experience he had, fighting the giant wolves in the Plane of Dreams, and tried to act out what novels said about getting pumped before going into a fight. He pointed towards the fog and asked, Do you know the rough location Lily's at? I do have a rough idea. Vivian pointed at the west side of the warehouse. There's a row of windows covered by the fog. Looks like an office of sorts. Lily's in one of them. Can we try to lure the werewolves away and then rush in to grab Lily? Hao Ren said hesitantly. If we need to fight after that, at least, we don't have to worry about a hostage. Vivian nodded and whispered an incantation. A swirl of red mist appeared out of nowhere and quickly formed into a humanoid shape resembling Vivian. The blood mist did not totally hide its presence, and the moment it approached the area, the dark fog stirred. The werewolves were clearly alerted to its presence. Let's go. Vivian pulled Hao Ren's arm as they leapt off the roof and ran straight towards the windows of the warehouse. The area was filled to the brim with leftover construction materials and was perfect at hiding what was going on there. Vivian even neglected to hide her wings and glided through the air. She arrived at the corner of the warehouse in the blink of an eye. Hao Ren could only rely on his legs, but he thankfully managed to keep up. As they positioned themselves by the western wall of the warehouse, they could hear bestial roars nearby. It was clear that Vivian's blood mist avatar had made contact with the werewolves. My blood mist can corrode glass and porcelain into nothing. An evil grin appeared across her face. There was a time when werewolves were innumerable. Hopefully, the Ebons sent someone with brains. Hao Ren looked up towards the row of windows. He guessed from the height that the building was at least 2 stories high and Lily was possibly being held in one of the offices on the second floor. As Vivian mentioned, black fog swirled menacingly outside the windows. He reached into his pocket and a voice suddenly appeared in his head. I'm warning you. Don't you dare use me as a projectile. Why would I even? Hao Ren was flustered at the rather sensitive MDT. I'm trying to get my phone to give Lily a call. To see if she could fight her. Before Hao Ren could finish his sentence, a violent shout rang out nearby. F***ers. I knew it was you, bloodsuckers.